Hello there and welcome to Life Beyond Seen, a quiet place where curiosity slows down and science keeps you company, while the world outside gradually fades into the background. This channel exists for moments like this one, when the day has finally loosened its grip and your mind is ready to wander without needing to arrive anywhere in particular. Tonight, we're drifting downward, far below familiar waters, into a realm where vision itself begins to fail, and where survival depends not on strength or speed, but on the delicate art of going unnoticed. The deep ocean is not just dark. That word doesn't quite do it justice. Darkness, as we usually experience it, still leaves room for shapes, edges, and hints of movement. The deep sea is different. It is a place where sunlight weakens, thins, and eventually disappears entirely, not because it's blocked, but because water itself slowly absorbs it. Metre by metre, the ocean strips light away until what remains is a heavy, blue-black quiet where seeing becomes optional and being seen becomes dangerous. And yet, this is not an empty place. It is crowded with life, busy with motion, full of creatures drifting, hunting, feeding, reproducing, and doing all of it, while remaining almost impossible to detect. What's strange is that many of these animals aren't hiding behind rocks or burying themselves in sediment. They're out in the open water. No walls, no corners, no shadows in the way we usually understand them. Instead, they survive by becoming nearly invisible. Transparent bodies, colours that vanish, shapes that blur into the water itself. Some of them glow, not to stand out but to erase their own outlines. In a place where light is rare, visibility becomes a liability, and evolution responds in ways that feel almost unreal when you first encounter them. Think about how different this is from the world above the waves. On land, being visible often helps. Bright colours warn predators. Patterns signal danger. Displays attract mates. Movement announces presence. In the deep sea, all of those instincts flip. Brightness can get you eaten. Contrast can give you away. Even having a solid outline can be enough for something else to notice you, and noticing often leads to becoming food. So the deep ocean has quietly shaped life toward the same goal over and over again. Be harder to see, then harder still. Before we sink any further, let me pause for a moment and ask you something gently. Where are you listening from right now? Is it late where you are, or is the day still holding on? Maybe you're stretched out somewhere comfortable, or maybe you're letting this play softly in the background while the room grows quieter. It's always interesting, isn't it? Thinking about how people all over the world can be sharing the same moment of sound, even while surrounded by different light, different weather, different hours on the clock. The ocean doesn't care about time zones, but we still do. If this kind of slow exploration feels soothing to you, or if learning something new while winding down helps your thoughts settle, you're very welcome to like the video or subscribe. It helps this calm little space reach others who might be looking for the same gentle pause. No pressure at all, just an open invitation. Now, let's ease back into the water. The idea of invisibility usually belongs to stories, not biology. Cloaks, spells, advanced technology. We tend to think of invisibility as something extraordinary, but in the deep sea it's routine, it's practical, it's common. Entire ecosystems are built around creatures that don't want to be noticed, and that have bodies designed accordingly. Some are so clear you can see their organs floating inside them. Others are so dark they absorb nearly every photon that touches them. Some erase their shadows from below, matching the faint glow of the surface so perfectly that predators looking up see nothing but empty water. And this isn't about perfection, it's about enough. In the deep ocean, being slightly harder to see than your neighbour can be the difference between surviving and disappearing. There's no finish line, no final form, just constant pressure from hunger and avoidance, shaping bodies generation after generation. One of the most important things to understand is that the deep sea isn't uniformly dark. Light fades in layers. Near the surface, sunlight is strong and full spectrum. Reds, yellows, greens, blues, all visible. As you descend, red light vanishes first, then orange, then yellow. By the time you reach a few hundred meters down, everything is bathed in blue. Go deeper still, and even that disappears, leaving only darkness punctuated by occasional flashes of bioluminescence. This gradual loss of light creates very specific visual conditions, and animals evolve to match them with remarkable precision. Transparency, for example, works best where there is still some light. In the upper layers of the deep ocean, being clear means light passes straight through you. No reflection, no shadow, no obvious shape. Jellyfish, comb jellies, larval fish, and countless drifting creatures use this strategy. Their bodies are mostly water, held together by delicate structures that barely interrupt the light moving through them. To a predator looking from the side, there's almost nothing to see. But transparency has limits. As light fades, being clear matters less, and other strategies take over. Deep black pigmentation becomes useful. Not the black we think of, but a black so deep it absorbs nearly all incoming light, including the faint glows produced by other animals. Some deep-sea fish are coated in specialized skin that reflects less light than almost any material found in nature. Even when illuminated directly, they appear as empty space, a hole in the water rather than a body. This is not accidental. Predators in the deep sea often rely on bioluminescence, either their own or that of others. A brief flash can reveal movement, a glow can outline a shape, so absorbing light becomes a form of defense. If there's nothing to reflect, there's nothing to detect. And then there are the creatures that do something even more unexpected. They produce light to hide themselves. Counterillumination sounds like a contradiction, but it's one of the most effective camouflage techniques ever evolved. From below, faint light still filters down from the surface. Predators hunting upward look for silhouettes, dark shapes blocking that glow. Some animals erase that silhouette by glowing from their undersides, matching the brightness above them so precisely that their shadow disappears. They don't vanish completely, but they blend so well that detection becomes difficult enough to matter. All of this raises an obvious question. Why does invisibility matter so much down there? The answer lies in how energy works in the deep ocean. Food is scarce. Every movement costs energy. Every failed hunt wastes precious effort. If you're a predator, you can't afford to chase everything you see. If you're prey, you can't afford to be noticed often. This creates a system where minimizing encounters is just as important as winning them. So animals adapt not to dominate the environment, but to fade into it. As we continue, we'll move deeper into how vision works in near-total darkness, how color becomes meaningless, how bodies change shape when outlines become dangerous, and how evolution keeps pushing life towards subtler and subtler forms of disappearance. None of this happens suddenly. It unfolds slowly, layer by layer, just like the descent itself. For now, let yourself settle into this idea. A vast living world where survival depends on not standing out, where being almost invisible is not a trick but a way of life. We're only just beginning to see how much of the ocean operates this way, and the deeper we go, the more this quiet pattern repeats. Far below the surface of the ocean, long after waves have forgotten the wind and sunlight has thinned into something pale and unreliable, there exists a region where light does not disappear all at once, but instead fades gradually, quietly, as if it were being diluted by the water itself. This fading is not dramatic. There is no sharp boundary, no sudden blackout. Instead, light weakens centimetre by centimetre, metre by metre, until brightness becomes memory rather than presence. This slow withdrawal of light is one of the most important forces shaping life in the deep sea, because long before darkness becomes complete, vision begins to lose its authority. Near the surface, sunlight enters the water, carrying the full spectrum of colours familiar to us. Reds, oranges, yellows, greens, blues, all arrive together, scattering and bending as they pass through moving waves. But water is not a neutral medium. It absorbs light, and it does so selectively. Longer wavelengths, especially red light, are absorbed first. This means that even a short distance below the surface, red objects begin to look darker, then grey, then nearly black. As depth increases, orange follows, then yellow, then green. By the time sunlight reaches several hundred meters down, almost everything is filtered into shades of blue. Not because blue dominates, but because it survives longer than the rest. This gradual loss matters more than total darkness ever could. In this dim zone, often called the twilight region, there is just enough light to see, but not enough to see clearly. Shapes exist without detail. Movement is detectable, but identity is uncertain. This is where the deep ocean begins to teach its first lesson. Being visible does not guarantee being understood, and being seen does not always mean being recognized. For animals living here, the problem is not only avoiding predators or finding food, but doing so in an environment where vision is unreliable and often misleading. As light continues to weaken with depth, it becomes increasingly directional. Most of it comes from above, filtered through layers of water and plankton, arriving as a faint glow rather than a beam. There is very little light from the sides, almost none from below. This creates a world where shadows behave differently. On land, shadows fall across surfaces. In open water, shadows become silhouettes. Anything that interrupts the faint glow from above can be detected from below as a darker shape against a slightly brighter background. This single visual rule has enormous consequences. It means that outlines matter more than details. It means that shape can betray presence even when colour cannot. This is why many deep-sea creatures are built to avoid sharp outlines. Long trailing appendages, gelatinous bodies, soft edges that blur into the surrounding water all serve to break up recognisable shapes. It is not about becoming invisible in the absolute sense. It is about becoming ambiguous. In a place where light barely arrives, ambiguity can be safer than clarity. The water itself plays an active role in this process. It scatters light unevenly, bending it, diffusing it, and constantly shifting its direction. Even in calm conditions, the ocean is never still. Microscopic particles drift through the water column, reflecting and absorbing light in unpredictable ways. This creates visual noise, a kind of background static that further erodes clear perception. Against this constantly moving, shimmering field, animals that minimize contrast have a distinct advantage. At greater depths, beyond the reach of meaningful sunlight, darkness becomes nearly complete. But even here, the absence of sunlight does not mean the absence of light altogether. Life brings its own illumination. Bioluminescence, the ability of living organisms to produce light through chemical reactions, becomes the dominant visual language of the deep ocean. Flashes, glows, pulses, and steady points of light appear and vanish in the dark, often without revealing the source that created them. This makes the deep sea one of the few places on Earth where darkness and light coexist in a delicate, shifting balance, controlled not by the sun, but by biology. In this environment, seeing is no longer passive. It is an active process shaped by expectation and interpretation. Predators are not scanning for detailed images. They are detecting changes, a flicker, a shadow where none should be, a movement that breaks the pattern of drifting particles. This means that anything which reduces those cues, anything that blends into the existing visual noise, becomes harder to detect, even if it is not truly hidden. Light also behaves differently at depth, because pressure changes the properties of water itself. As depth increases, pressure compresses both water and the tissues of the animals living within it. This affects how light passes through bodies. Many deep-sea animals have tissues with refractive indices very close to that of seawater. This means light bends through them, almost as if they were not there. Transparency is not just about being clear. It is about matching the optical properties of the surrounding environment as closely as possible. The result is a world where boundaries soften, where inside and outside are harder to distinguish, where organs float visibly within bodies that seem barely present at all. To human eyes, this can feel unsettling, even fragile. But in the deep sea, it is highly functional. Structure is minimized to what is necessary. Anything extra increases visibility. Anything rigid risks casting a shadow. Anything reflective becomes a signal. Even the direction an animal faces matters. Many species orient their bodies vertically rather than horizontally, aligning themselves with the direction of light rather than cutting across it. This reduces the width of their silhouette when viewed from below. Others adopt flattened shapes or narrow profiles that present the smallest possible interruption to the faint glow above. These are not conscious choices. They are the accumulated results of countless generations filtered by survival in low light. It is also important to understand that the deep ocean is not visually empty, even when it feels that way to us. Human eyes are poorly adapted to this environment. Our vision depends on relatively high levels of light and a broad range of colours. In the deep sea, those assumptions fail. Many animals there have eyes tuned specifically to the wavelengths that remain. Blue-sensitive vision dominates. Some species can detect extremely faint light levels that would register as total darkness to us. Others have abandoned detailed vision altogether, relying instead on motion detection or light sensitivity rather than image formation. This difference in perception means that invisibility is relative. A creature that is nearly invisible to one predator may be obvious to another with different visual abilities. Evolution responds to this by pushing camouflage strategies toward the most common or most dangerous observers. In the deep sea, that often means avoiding detection by animals looking upward, where silhouettes are most easily seen. This pressure shapes body orientation, pigmentation, and behaviour in subtle but consistent ways. Light scarcity also influences behaviour. Many deep-sea animals move slowly, not because they are weak, but because sudden movement is more visible than gradual drift. In a dim environment, motion stands out more than form. Slow, deliberate movement allows animals to blend into the background of drifting particles and gentle currents. Some species time their movements to coincide with changes in ambient light, such as the faint pulses created by surface waves far above, further masking their presence. As we descend deeper still, light becomes less of a resource and more of a risk. Any light emitted becomes a potential signal, not only to prey or mates, but to predators. This creates a careful balance. Bioluminescence is used sparingly and often in ways that confuse rather than reveal. Short flashes rather than steady glows. Directed beams rather than broad illumination. Light becomes a tool, not an environment. What emerges from all of this is a world shaped not by what can be seen clearly, but by what can be avoided, obscured, or misinterpreted. Light barely arrives, and when it does, it carries consequences. It defines where shadows form, where outlines emerge, and where survival becomes a matter of visual subtlety rather than strength. As this dimness deepens, the strategies animals use to cope with it grow more extreme. Transparency gives way to absorption. Colour gives way to darkness. Shape gives way to suggestion. And the ocean becomes a place where existence itself is quieter, softer, and easier to miss. From here, understanding why so many deep-sea creatures are nearly invisible becomes less mysterious. It becomes almost inevitable, shaped by an environment where light is scarce, vision is fragile, and being unseen is often the safest state of all. From this foundation, the next layer begins to reveal itself. Once light becomes limited, the very act of seeing turns into a challenge, and the ocean responds by changing not just how creatures look, but how sight itself functions in the depths. In the deep ocean, being seen is not a neutral event. It is not simply a matter of perception or awareness. It is a problem, one that life has been trying to solve for millions of years under conditions that make mistakes unforgiving. Near the surface, being visible can serve many purposes. It can signal health, warn enemies, attract attention, or communicate intent. In the depths, visibility rarely brings benefits without cost. To be seen at all is to risk becoming part of something else's energy budget. The reason this problem is so persistent lies in how sparse resources are in the deep sea. Food does not arrive evenly or reliably. Most of it sinks from above in the form of drifting organic material, dead plankton, waste, or the occasional larger fall like a fish or whale carcass. For predators, every hunt matters. For prey, every escape does too. There is little margin for error. This means encounters themselves are dangerous. Not just fights, but moments of detection. If one organism becomes aware of another, the balance often tips quickly toward consumption. Because of this, the deep ocean does not reward attention, it punishes it. Evolution responds accordingly. Instead of favouring creatures that announce themselves or dominate space, it favours those that minimise the chances of interaction altogether. The first step toward survival is often not defence or offence, but avoidance, and avoidance begins with not being noticed. This makes vision a central pressure shaping life in the deep. But vision here does not work the way we expect. It's not about seeing clearly across long distances. Water absorbs and scatters light too efficiently for that. Instead, vision operates at close range, focused on detecting change rather than detail, a slight contrast, a movement out of rhythm, a glow where there should be none. These cues are enough to trigger pursuit or evasion. So animals evolved to suppress those cues wherever possible. One of the most important ideas to understand is that in the deep ocean, most visual detection happens from below. This is because the faint remaining light almost always comes from above. Even at great depths, there is often a subtle gradient. Darker below, slightly brighter above. Predators exploit this by positioning themselves beneath potential prey, looking upward for silhouettes. Anything that interrupts that gradient becomes visible, even if it has no colour, no markings, and no motion. This turns the simple fact of having a body into a liability. Any solid mass creates contrast. Any edge produces an outline. Even internal structures can betray presence if they scatter light differently than the surrounding water. So deep-sea organisms are shaped by the need to reduce not just brightness, but detectability. The goal is not invisibility in absolute terms. It is reducing the likelihood that another organism's sensory system will register you as something worth reacting to. This pressure leads to extreme solutions. Transparency is one of the most effective in zones where some light remains. By allowing light to pass through rather than reflect or absorb it, transparent bodies create very little visual disturbance. To an observer, there is no clear boundary between animal and water. Instead of seeing an object, the predator sees only slight distortions, if anything at all. For animals like jellyfish, larval fish, and many planktonic organisms, this strategy is so effective that they can exist in open water with minimal protection. But transparency is not universally useful. As depth increases and sunlight disappears entirely, transparency stops offering advantages. In complete darkness, there is no ambient light to pass through. Detection now depends largely on bioluminescence. Here, the problem shifts. Being seen at all often means reflecting or responding to light produced by another organism. In this environment, the worst thing a body can do is reflect light back toward its source. This is why some deep-sea animals are extraordinarily dark. Not just dark in colour, but engineered at a microscopic level to trap incoming light. Their skin contains structures that scatter photons internally until they are absorbed, preventing reflection. When illuminated, these animals do not appear shiny or outlined. They appear like gaps in space, regions where light simply fails to return. To a predator relying on reflected bioluminescence, this makes the prey nearly undetectable. The challenge becomes even more complex because predators themselves vary. Some rely on vision, others use vibration, pressure changes, or chemical cues. In the deep ocean, no single sense dominates completely. This means invisibility is never total, it is always selective. Animals evolve to avoid the most common or most dangerous detection methods in their environment, accepting vulnerability in other areas if necessary. This trade-off shapes behaviour as much as anatomy. Many deep-sea creatures move only when they must. Motion draws attention. Even transparent bodies can be detected if they move too abruptly. Slow drifting allows animals to blend into the background of sinking particles and gentle currents. Some species time their movements to moments when visual noise is higher, such as during bursts of bioluminescence triggered by other organisms or during subtle changes in water movement. Others adopt behaviours that actively confuse observers. Sudden flashes of light can startle predators or create false targets. Releasing glowing material can draw attention away from the body itself. These tactics do not make the animal invisible, but they disrupt the process of being seen clearly enough to pursue. In a place where decisions are made in fractions of seconds, confusion can be enough. Another complication is that eyes themselves vary dramatically in the deep sea. Some animals have enormous eyes adapted to gather the faintest possible light. Others have reduced or absent eyes, relying on other senses entirely. This creates a landscape where what counts as visibility depends on who is doing the looking. A creature that appears invisible to one predator may be obvious to another. Evolution cannot solve this perfectly. It can only optimize based on probabilities. This leads to a kind of visual arms race. As some animals become harder to see, others evolve better ways to detect them. Larger eyes, more sensitive photoreceptors, neural systems tuned to specific patterns of movement or contrast. In response, prey species further reduce their detectability. This cycle does not end. It simply shifts the balance gradually towards subtler and subtler forms of presence. What makes the deep ocean unusual is that this arms race plays out in an environment where encounters are rare to begin with. Unlike a forest or reef, where organisms are densely packed and interactions are constant, the deep sea is vast and sparse. Many animals may go days or weeks without encountering another large organism. This amplifies the importance of each encounter. If you are seen, it is likely because something is already close enough to matter. As a result, deep sea life often prioritizes reducing encounter rates rather than winning encounters. Being unseen is better than being defended. Not being noticed is better than fighting back. This logic explains why so many deep-sea animals lack heavy armour, spines, or aggressive displays. Those features add mass, create outlines, and increase reflectivity. In the deep, subtlety outperforms strength. There's also a metabolic cost to visibility. Pigments, patterns, and complex structures require energy to produce and maintain. In an environment where food is limited, unnecessary features are liabilities. Transparency, gelatinous tissues, and simplified body plans are not signs of primitiveness. They're energy-efficient solutions optimized for a low-light, low-resource world. Even reproduction is shaped by the problem of being seen. Many deep-sea species release gametes into the water rather than seeking mates directly. Others use faint chemical signals rather than visual ones. Some produce light only at specific times or in specific patterns to minimize unwanted attention. Every signal risks attracting not just a partner, but a predator. All of this reinforces a central truth. In the deep ocean, being seen is not just dangerous, it is inefficient. It increases energy expenditure, raises risk, and offers few rewards. Over evolutionary time, this pressure accumulates, shaping bodies and behaviours toward invisibility not as a special adaptation, but as a baseline condition. This helps explain why deep-sea animals often look strange to us. Our expectations are shaped by surface environments where visibility is common and useful. In the deep, those assumptions break down. Life there is not designed to be observed easily. It is designed to persist quietly, often unnoticed. in a place where light barely exists and attention is rarely welcome. As we continue, this idea becomes even clearer. Once being seen becomes a problem, the environment begins to favour darkness itself, not just the absence of light, but the active suppression of it. And that leads us naturally toward the next layer of this story, where darkness stops being a backdrop and becomes a rule that rewrites how survival works altogether. Darkness in the deep ocean is not simply the absence of light. It is an active condition that reshapes how life functions, how energy is spent, and how survival is defined. Once light becomes scarce enough, many of the rules that govern life near the surface no longer apply. Strategies that work well in bright environments lose their usefulness, and new priorities take their place. In this world, darkness is not a challenge to overcome. It is a framework that everything else must adapt to. Near the surface, survival often depends on speed, strength, and awareness. You see threats coming. You spot opportunities at a distance. You react quickly. Light allows for anticipation. Darkness removes that advantage. In the deep sea, encounters are sudden. There is rarely a long warning. A predator does not appear on the horizon. It is simply there, close enough that the next moment matters more than the last. This immediacy changes how animals allocate their resources. Instead of investing heavily in rapid response, many species invest in reducing the chances of encounters happening at all. This shift begins with energy, darkness and cold, slow chemical reactions. Food is scarce, every calorie matters. In such conditions, high-speed chases are inefficient. Constant vigilance is expensive. Large muscles, fast reflexes, and complex sensory systems consume energy, even when they are not being used. In a bright, food-rich environment, that cost can be justified. In the deep ocean, it often cannot. Survival favours efficiency over performance. Darkness also alters the value of information. In well-lit environments, seeing more is almost always better. More visual detail means better decisions. In the deep sea, information arrives in fragments, a flash, a shadow, a vibration, a chemical trace. Gathering too much information is not always possible, and trying to interpret incomplete signals can be dangerous. False positives waste energy. False negatives can be fatal. As a result, many deep-sea animals rely on simplified decision-making, react only when certain thresholds are crossed, ignore anything ambiguous. If something is not clearly prey or threat, it may be safer to do nothing at all. This favours creatures that blend into the background rather than those that stand out. In darkness, contrast becomes more important than colour. A moving shape against still water is easier to detect than a stationary one. A sharp outline is easier to notice than a diffuse form, so animals evolved to minimise contrast in every way possible. Soft bodies, slow movement, and flexible shapes reduce the likelihood of triggering another organism's detection systems. Darkness also removes the usefulness of many visual signals. Bright coloration, patterns, and displays lose meaning when they cannot be seen clearly. This changes how animals communicate. In the deep sea, communication shifts away from vision and toward other channels. Chemical signals travel through water and can persist over time. Pressure waves and vibrations can be detected without light. Bioluminescence replaces coloration, but it is used carefully, often briefly, and often in ways that mislead rather than inform. Even mating behaviours are shaped by darkness. In surface environments, finding a partner often involves visual cues and active searching. In the deep sea, searching is costly and risky. Some species reduce the need to search at all. Males may become permanently attached to females. Gametes may be released into the water in response to chemical cues rather than direct contact. These strategies reduce movement and visibility, lowering the risk associated with reproduction. Predation itself changes under darkness. Instead of relying on pursuit, many predators use ambush or opportunistic feeding. Waiting is cheaper than chasing. Drifting is cheaper than swimming. Some predators position themselves in places where prey is more likely to pass, conserving energy until a suitable target comes close enough to justify action. Others use bioluminescent lures to bring prey to them, eliminating the need to search actively. This creates a feedback loop. As predators become more efficient at detecting movement or light, prey species evolve to reduce those signals further. Movement becomes slower, light becomes rarer, bodies become less reflective. Over time, the entire ecosystem shifts towards stillness and subtlety. The deep ocean becomes a place where nothing wants to draw attention and everything benefits from restraint. Darkness also changes how time is experienced biologically. Many deep-sea animals have slower metabolisms, they grow more slowly, reproduce less frequently, and live longer lives. This is partly due to cold temperatures, but darkness plays a role as well. Without regular light cycles, circadian rhythms weaken or disappear. Day and night lose meaning. Instead of responding to daily patterns, animals respond to longer-term changes, such as seasonal shifts in food availability or the occasional arrival of large organic falls. This lack of rhythm reduces the need for constant activity. There is no daily rush to feed or avoid predators tied to sunrise or sunset. Life becomes episodic. Long periods of inactivity are punctuated by brief moments of intense action. In this context, being unnoticed during inactive periods is critical. Darkness makes inactivity safer, but only if the body does not betray presence through reflection, motion, or light emission. Another consequence of darkness is the redefinition of size. In bright environments, larger size can be an advantage. It deters predators and allows for dominance. In the deep sea, large size increases visibility. A bigger body interrupts more light, casts a larger silhouette, and requires more energy to sustain. Many deep-sea animals are small or have elongated, narrow forms that minimize cross-sectional area when viewed from below. Even large species often have reduced muscle mass and low-density tissues to offset the costs of size. Darkness also influences where animals live vertically. Many species participate in daily vertical migrations, rising toward the surface at night to feed and sinking back into darkness during the day. This behavior takes advantage of darkness as cover. At night, surface waters are darker, reducing predation risk. During the day, deeper waters provide safety. This constant movement reinforces the importance of being hard to see at all depths, not just in one layer of the ocean. Over evolutionary time, darkness becomes more than an environmental condition. It becomes a selective filter. Traits that increase visibility are gradually removed. Traits that reduce detection accumulate. This does not happen in isolation. Each adaptation influences others. A transparent body favors reduced skeletal structure. Reduced skeletons favor gelatinous tissues. Gelatinous tissues favor drifting behavior. Drifting behavior reduces energy needs. Lower energy needs allow survival in food-poor environments. Darkness ties all of these changes together into a coherent survival strategy. It is important to note that darkness does not eliminate danger. It reshapes it. Predators still exist. Death still occurs. But the pathways to survival are narrower and quieter. Success belongs not to the fastest or strongest, but to those that manage risk over long periods, those that avoid unnecessary exposure, those that remain ambiguous. From a human perspective, this can feel counterintuitive. We often associate survival with action. The deep sea rewards restraint. Darkness enforces patience. It teaches that sometimes the best response is to remain still, to let the environment pass around you, to exist without asserting yourself visually or physically. As we move deeper into this topic, the consequences of darkness become even more specific. Once visibility becomes a liability, animals begin to explore ways of removing themselves from sight altogether. not through hiding, but through physical transparency, optical tricks, and bodies that seem to dissolve into the water around them. Darkness sets the stage for these solutions, making invisibility not just advantageous, but logical. And with that shift, the deep ocean begins to reveal one of its most striking patterns. In a place where darkness governs survival, the most successful creatures are often the ones that appear to barely exist at all. In the dim layers of the ocean where sunlight still lingers but no longer dominates, one survival strategy appears again and again with striking consistency. Bodies begin to lose colour, edges soften, organs become visible through skin. Animals start to look less like solid objects and more like temporary arrangements of water. This is not fragility or accident. It is a deliberate outcome of evolutionary pressure. Transparency in the deep sea is not a novelty. It is one of the most effective ways to solve the problem of being seen. To understand why transparency works so well, it helps to think about how vision normally functions underwater. Light travels through water differently than through air. It scatters more, bends more, and loses intensity faster. Objects are not seen because they exist, but because they interrupt light in a noticeable way. Reflection, absorption, and refraction all create contrast, and contrast is what the eye detects. Transparency interferes with that process. When light passes through an organism instead of bouncing off it or being absorbed, there is less contrast for a viewer to notice. The body does not announce itself. It simply allows light to continue on its path, as if nothing were there. In the upper deep sea zones where faint sunlight still filters down from above, this effect is especially powerful. Predators scanning the water column are often looking upward, searching for silhouettes against the slightly brighter surface glow. A transparent body produces little to no silhouette. There is no dark outline, no clear shape blocking the light. Instead, there may be only a subtle distortion, a slight bending of light that is easily lost among the visual noise created by drifting particles and moving water. For many predators, this is not enough to trigger a response. Transparency also works from the side. In scattered light, a transparent animal reflects very little back toward the observer. Without reflection, there is nothing to catch the eye. Even when close, the animal may only be detectable if it moves, or if its internal structures create momentary highlights. This makes transparency especially effective for animals that drift slowly or remain relatively still for long periods. What makes this strategy even more remarkable is how widespread it is. Transparency appears across unrelated groups of organisms: jellyfish, comb jellies, salps, larval fish, crustaceans, squid. The fact that so many different lineages converge on this same solution tells us something important. Transparency is not a niche adaptation. It is a broadly useful response to a shared problem. When light is limited but still present, and when being seen carries high risk, becoming optically similar to water itself is one of the safest options available. Achieving transparency is not simple. Biological tissues are complex. Cells contain structures that scatter light. Proteins, membranes, and organelles all have optical properties that differ from seawater. To become transparent, organisms must reduce or reorganize these structures. Pigments are minimized or eliminated. Dense tissues are avoided. Internal organs may be rearranged to reduce their visual footprint. In some species, organs are clustered into small regions, leaving much of the body clear. In others, organs themselves become partially transparent. Water content plays a major role. Many transparent deep-sea animals are composed mostly of water, sometimes more than 95%. This reduces differences in refractive index between the body and the surrounding environment. When light passes from one medium to another with similar optical properties, it bends less and scatters less. The closer an organism's tissues match seawater, the harder it becomes to see. This is why gelatinous bodies are so common among transparent deep-sea creatures. Gelatinous tissue provides structure without density. It allows the body to maintain shape while remaining optically subtle. From a human perspective, these animals may appear delicate or insubstantial. In reality, they are highly optimized for their environment. Their bodies are built not for strength or speed, but for remaining unnoticed. Transparency also offers flexibility. Because transparent animals are often soft-bodied, they can change shape easily. They can contract, expand, or elongate without exposing rigid structures that would create shadows or sharp outlines. This fluidity helps them adapt to currents and avoid sudden movements that might draw attention. It also allows them to absorb physical impacts without injury, an advantage in an environment where collisions with unseen objects can occur. There are trade-offs, of course. Transparent bodies offer little protection against physical damage. They provide no armor, no spines, no thick barriers. But in the deep sea, avoiding detection is often more effective than resisting attack. Armor only matters if you are found. Transparency aims to prevent that moment from happening in the first place. Another challenge is that transparency is never perfect. Internal organs, especially those involved in digestion or reproduction, can be difficult to conceal completely. Food inside the body may be opaque. Reproductive tissues may be denser. Some transparent animals solve this by timing their feeding and reproductive activities to minimize visibility. Others accept partial visibility as a compromise, relying on motionlessness or depth to reduce risk. Some species use transparency in combination with other strategies. A body may be mostly clear, but with faint pigmentation that breaks up internal shapes. Others use reflective surfaces inside the body to redirect light in ways that reduce contrast. In some cases, transparency is paired with bioluminescence used selectively to confuse predators rather than reveal form. These layered strategies highlight an important point. Invisibility in the deep sea is rarely achieved through a single trait. It is the result of multiple adaptations working together. Transparency is especially common in early life stages. Many deep-sea fish larvae are almost completely transparent. At this stage, the animals are small, vulnerable, and drifting in open water. They lack speed, defenses, and experience. Transparency gives them a chance to survive long enough to grow into more specialized adult forms. As they mature and move into different depths or adopt different behaviors, their appearance may change. Some retain transparency, others shift toward darkness or pigmentation better suited to deeper environments. This transition reveals something important about transparency. It is not a universal solution. It works best under specific conditions, where there is still ambient light, where predators rely heavily on vision, where the cost of producing pigments outweighs the benefits. As conditions change, so do the optimal strategies. As animals descend into deeper, darker zones, transparency becomes less effective. Without ambient light, there is nothing to pass through the body. Detection now depends on reflected bioluminescence rather than sunlight. In these conditions, transparency can actually become a disadvantage, allowing light from predators to pass through the body and reveal internal structures. This is one reason why extreme transparency becomes less common in the deepest regions, replaced by other forms of invisibility. Still, in the vast mid-water zones where light barely arrives but has not vanished entirely, transparency dominates. This region contains enormous numbers of organisms, forming the largest habitat on Earth by volume. The success of transparency here shapes entire food webs. Predators evolve eyes capable of detecting faint distortions. Prey evolve bodies that minimize those distortions further. The result is a subtle visual arms race fought at the edge of perception. From our perspective, transparency challenges how we define presence. We're used to thinking of animals as solid, bounded entities. In the deep sea, many animals seem to blur the line between organism and environment. They are not hidden behind camouflage patterns or disguises. They are present, but optically understated. Their bodies participate in the movement of light rather than interrupting it. This has implications beyond biology. Transparency in the deep sea shows how physical laws influence evolution. It is not just predators and prey shaping each other, but optics, fluid dynamics, and energy constraints shaping what forms are possible. Light behaves a certain way in water. Certain organisms that align themselves with those properties survive more often. Over time, this alignment becomes embodied in tissue, shape, and behavior. Transparency also reminds us that invisibility does not require complexity. There is no elaborate mechanism here, no active system switching on and off. It is a passive state, maintained simply by existing in a form that does not disturb the environment. In a place where energy is precious, this simplicity is a strength. As we continue to move deeper into the ocean's logic, transparency begins to feel less like an oddity and more like a natural outcome. When light is scarce but not absent, when being seen carries risk, and when efficiency matters more than display, allowing light to pass through you is an elegant solution. But this solution has limits. As light fades further and bioluminescence takes over as the primary source of illumination, transparency alone is no longer enough. The ocean responds by shifting strategies again, moving away from letting light pass through and toward preventing light from returning at all. And that shift leads us into a different kind of disappearance, one defined not by clarity but by darkness itself. In the deep ocean, solidity is optional, density is negotiable. Weight, as we tend to understand it, becomes less important than presence, and presence itself is something many creatures are actively trying to reduce. This is where bodies begin to look unfamiliar, not because they are poorly formed, but because they are formed around a different set of priorities. In a place where light is scarce, food is limited, and encounters are risky, having a body made of almost nothing can be one of the most effective ways to survive. Many deep-sea animals are not built around strength or rigidity. Instead, they are built around absence, less muscle, less bone, less dense tissue overall. Their bodies are dominated by water, held together by minimal structural frameworks that provide just enough shape to function, without adding unnecessary mass or optical contrast. To human eyes, these animals can appear fragile, even unfinished. But in their environment, they are precisely tuned. This reduction in substance begins with buoyancy. In surface waters, buoyancy is often managed through active swimming, gas-filled organs, or rigid skeletal structures that counter gravity. In the deep sea, gravity still exists, but the environment rewards neutral buoyancy. Sinking costs energy, rising costs energy. Staying where you are, drifting with minimal effort, is far more efficient. Bodies made mostly of water naturally achieve this balance. They neither sink rapidly nor float uncontrollably. They hover. Hovering matters because movement is one of the easiest things to detect in low light. A drifting organism that moves with the surrounding water blends into the background far more effectively than one that must constantly swim to maintain position. By reducing body density, deep-sea animals reduce the need for active locomotion. Less muscle is required, less fuel is burned, less motion is produced. Each of these outcomes reduces visibility and conserves energy. The internal structure of these bodies reflects the same logic. Bones, where they exist at all, are often thin and lightly mineralized. In many species, cartilage replaces bone entirely. Cartilage is lighter, more flexible, and requires less energy to produce. In others, internal support comes from fluid-filled compartments rather than solid frameworks. Pressure-resistant gels and connective tissues provide shape without density. This has optical consequences as well. Dense structures scatter light more strongly than soft, hydrated tissues. By minimizing dense components, these animals reduce internal reflections and shadows. Light passing through the body encounters fewer abrupt changes in material properties, which means less scattering and less contrast. The body becomes optically quieter, even if it is not fully transparent. Muscle tissue is also reduced or redistributed. Fast, powerful muscles are metabolically expensive. They require constant maintenance, oxygen, and nutrients. In an environment where rapid movement offers little advantage and where food is unpredictable, such muscles are inefficient. Many deep-sea animals move slowly or infrequently, relying on currents or passive drifting. Their muscles are designed for endurance rather than speed, capable of brief movements when necessary, but not constant activity. This does not mean these animals are weak. It means strength is applied selectively. When movement occurs, it is often sudden and purposeful. A brief contraction to capture prey, a slow adjustment to orientation, a gentle pulse to change depth. These movements are economical and controlled, minimizing visual disturbance. Another consequence of low-density bodies is compressibility. In the deep ocean, pressure increases dramatically with depth. Rigid structures can be damaged by rapid pressure changes. Soft, flexible bodies tolerate these conditions far better. They compress slightly under pressure and expand when pressure decreases, without suffering structural failure. This allows animals to move vertically through the water column more easily, adjusting depth in response to food availability or predation risk. This vertical flexibility ties into daily and seasonal migrations. Many mid-water animals move hundreds of meters up and down each day. Having a body that can accommodate these pressure changes without specialized mechanisms is a major advantage. Again, simplicity becomes a strength. From an energetic perspective, bodies made of almost nothing are cheaper to build and maintain. Less tissue means fewer resources invested in growth. In an environment where food arrives irregularly, this reduces vulnerability during lean periods. Animals can survive longer without feeding. They can afford slower growth rates. They can persist through extended scarcity. This scarcity-driven efficiency shapes not just body composition, but body shape. Many deep-sea animals are elongated, flattened, or amorphous. Sharp angles and rigid outlines are avoided. These shapes reduce drag, reduce silhouette, and allow the body to deform in response to currents rather than resisting them. Resistance creates turbulence. Turbulence creates detectable movement. Compliance reduces both. Some organisms take this to extremes. Gelatinous zooplankton, such as salps and siphonophores, are essentially living tubes or chains of simple units, each performing basic functions. Individually, these units are minimal. Together they form larger structures capable of feeding and reproduction, without ever becoming dense or rigid. Their bodies are so water-rich that they are nearly invisible unless illuminated directly. This strategy also influences how these animals interact with predators. Many predators rely on suction feeding, rapidly expanding their mouths to draw prey in. Soft-bodied animals can deform under these forces, sometimes slipping free or reducing the effectiveness of the suction. Hard, rigid prey is easier to capture and handle. Again, being made of almost nothing can be protective. There are costs to this approach. Soft bodies are vulnerable to mechanical damage. They are easily torn, punctured, or crushed. But in the deep sea, encounters that involve physical contact are relatively rare compared to surface environments. Avoidance is more common than collision. The reduced frequency of physical interactions makes the trade-off worthwhile. This approach also affects sensory systems. Large, complex sensory organs require structural support and dense tissues. Many deep-sea animals simplify their sensory apparatus accordingly. Vision may be reduced or specialized. Lateral line systems may be emphasized. Chemical sensing may dominate. These systems integrate well with soft bodies, requiring less rigid support. It is important to recognize that these bodies are not unfinished versions of surface animals. They are not underdeveloped or primitive. They are the result of long-term selection under specific constraints. In a world where light is limited, energy is scarce, and being noticed is dangerous, reducing physical presence is a logical outcome. From a human perspective, these animals challenge our assumptions about what a body should be. we tend to associate robustness with success. In the deep sea, robustness is measured differently. Survival depends on efficiency, subtlety, and endurance rather than force. Bodies made of almost nothing are not a compromise. They are a solution. This also explains why many deep-sea animals appear alien or unreal when first observed. Our visual expectations are shaped by environments where solidity is common and useful. In the deep ocean, solidity is optional. What matters is how little an organism disturbs its surroundings, visually, mechanically, and energetically. As we continue to descend into this logic, the connection becomes clearer. Transparency reduces visual contrast. Low-density bodies reduce motion and energy use. Together they allow animals to exist in open water with minimal risk. But even this is not the final step. Light itself can still reveal outlines, even when bodies are soft and clear. To push invisibility further, the deep ocean turns to the medium itself. Water becomes more than a habitat. It becomes an active participant in concealment, bending light, scattering signals, and completing the disappearing act in ways no body could achieve alone. Water is not just the space deep-sea creatures live in, it is part of how they survive. In the deep ocean, water does far more than support weight or carry nutrients. It shapes how light moves, how sound travels, how motion is perceived, and how bodies are detected. Over time, life has learned to work with these properties rather than against them. What emerges is something close to a natural cloaking system, not built into the animal alone, but distributed between the body and the surrounding water. To understand how this works, it helps to step away from how we usually think about visibility. On land, air is mostly transparent and uniform. Light travels through it with relatively little interference. Objects are visible because they block light, reflect it, or cast shadows against solid surfaces. Underwater, the situation is very different. Water is dense, layered, and filled with particles. It absorbs, scatters, bends, and diffuses light constantly. Visibility is not determined solely by the object being observed, but by how the medium itself behaves between the observer and the object. One of the most important properties of water is scattering. Tiny particles suspended in the water column, including plankton, organic debris, and mineral matter, interact with light in unpredictable ways. They reflect some wavelengths, absorb others, and constantly shift position due to currents and turbulence. This creates a visual background that is never static. Even in calm conditions, the underwater visual field is in motion. Against this shifting background, animals that minimize contrast can effectively dissolve into the scene. Deep-sea organisms exploit this by aligning their bodies with the optical noise of the water. Slow drifting movements mimic the motion of surrounding particles. Soft edges prevent sharp boundaries from forming. Transparency allows background light to pass through rather than bounce back. Together, these traits allow the animal to blend not into a specific pattern, but into variability itself. The body becomes just another irregularity in a field already full of them. Refraction also plays a key role. Light bends when it passes from one medium to another with a different refractive index. Water has a higher refractive index than air, and biological tissues vary widely in their optical properties. Many deep-sea animals have tissues whose refractive index closely matches that of seawater. This minimizes bending at the boundary between body and environment. When light enters such a body, it continues along nearly the same path it would have taken through water alone. To an observer, the light does not announce that it has encountered an object. This is why matching the optical properties of water matters as much as transparency itself. A clear body that bends light strongly can still be detected. A body that bends light minimally becomes much harder to notice. Evolution fine-tunes these properties at the microscopic level, adjusting tissue composition, water content, and internal structure to reduce optical disruption. Water also filters light spectrally. Different wavelengths are absorbed at different rates, as discussed earlier. In deeper regions, most remaining ambient light is blue. Animals that reflect other wavelengths gain no advantage, because those wavelengths are not present to be reflected. As a result, coloration loses relevance, and reflectivity becomes more important than hue. Water enforces this by stripping away unused visual information. The environment itself simplifies the visual rules, and animals adapt to those simplified conditions. Another aspect of water as a cloaking device is its effect on shadows. In open water, there are no surfaces for shadows to fall upon. Shadows exist only as silhouettes against background light. Water softens these silhouettes by diffusing light from multiple angles. Even faint scattering can blur the edges of a shadow, making it harder to interpret. Animals with rounded, flexible shapes benefit from this diffusion. Their outlines are less distinct, and their silhouettes fade into gradients rather than sharp forms. Currents enhance this effect. Water is rarely still, especially in the mid-water zones where many nearly invisible animals live. Subtle currents shift both the animal and the surrounding particles, constantly changing the visual context. An observer cannot rely on a fixed frame of reference. Detection becomes a matter of probability rather than certainty. Animals that move with the currents rather than against them reduce the likelihood of standing out. Sound and vibration are also altered by water in ways that support concealment. While sound travels efficiently underwater, its directionality can be difficult to determine. Soft-bodied animals produce fewer sharp pressure waves than rigid, actively swimming ones. Their movements are smoother, generating less acoustic contrast. Water dampens and disperses these signals, further reducing detectability. Chemical cues behave similarly. Water dilutes and disperses chemical signals over distance and time. By minimizing waste output and metabolic byproducts, deep-sea animals reduce the chemical trails they leave behind. Again, the medium assists. Water spreads signals thinly, making it harder for predators to trace them back to a source. Pressure gradients in the deep ocean also contribute indirectly. High pressure compresses gases and soft tissues, reducing the presence of air-filled spaces that might otherwise reflect sound or light. Many deep-sea animals lack gas-filled organs entirely. This not only prevents damage from pressure changes, but also reduces internal boundaries that could create detectable signals. The body becomes more homogeneous, more like the surrounding water in both physical and optical terms. What emerges from all of this is a kind of shared invisibility. The animal is not hidden behind something. It is hidden within the properties of the medium itself. Water does much of the work. It bends light, scatters signals, softens outlines, and carries movement. The animal's role is to avoid disrupting these processes. Instead of imposing its presence, it cooperates with the environment. This cooperation extends to behavior. Many deep-sea animals position themselves in regions where water properties maximize concealment. They may stay within layers where particle density is high, increasing visual noise. They may remain at depths where ambient light is weakest, but still sufficient for transparency to matter. They may align their bodies with prevailing currents to reduce relative motion. The idea of water as a cloaking device also explains why deep-sea invisibility often fails when animals are brought to the surface or observed under artificial lighting. Bright directional lights overwhelm the scattering and absorption effects that normally conceal these organisms. The water no longer behaves the same way. Optical matching breaks down. Bodies that are nearly invisible in their natural habitat become suddenly obvious. This is not because the animals are poorly adapted, but because the context has changed. Their invisibility depends on a partnership with the environment. Remove one half of that partnership and the illusion collapses. This perspective helps clarify why deep-sea adaptations can seem so extreme. Animals are not just adapting to darkness or pressure in isolation. They are adapting to a medium that shapes every sensory interaction. Water is not passive. It actively filters, distorts, and redistributes information. Life that survives here does so by aligning itself with those processes as closely as possible. As we continue deeper into this topic, the focus begins to shift from the medium to the senses themselves. Once water becomes part of the cloaking system, the next question becomes how animals see or fail to see within that system. Vision in near total darkness operates under different constraints, and understanding those constraints reveals why invisibility remains such a powerful and persistent strategy in the deep ocean. Seeing in the deep ocean is nothing like seeing on land, and it is not even much like seeing in shallow water. As light fades, vision stops being about detail and starts becoming about detection. It is no longer a tool for understanding the world in full, but a narrow instrument tuned to very specific signals. This shift fundamentally changes how animals interact with their environment and with each other, and it explains why invisibility remains such a dominant survival strategy, even when eyes are still present. In near total darkness, the problem is not simply that there is less light. The problem is that light becomes unreliable. It arrives unevenly, from limited directions at unpredictable moments. Most of it does not come from the sun at all, but from living organisms producing it themselves. This creates a visual environment where illumination is sparse, brief, and often deceptive. Seeing, under these conditions, becomes less about forming images and more about interpreting clues. Many deep-sea animals still have eyes, and some of those eyes are remarkably large relative to body size. This might seem contradictory in a place where light is scarce, but it reflects how valuable even minimal visual information can be. Large eyes collect more photons, wider pupils allow more light to enter. Longer retinas increase the chance that faint signals will be detected. These adaptations do not restore clear vision. They extend the threshold at which vision remains possible at all. The structure of these eyes reveals their purpose. Deep-sea eyes often sacrifice sharpness for sensitivity. The retina may be packed with rod cells rather than cone cells. Rods are highly sensitive to light but poor at distinguishing colour and fine detail. In near darkness, colour vision becomes irrelevant anyway. As discussed earlier, most wavelengths have already been absorbed by the water. Blue dominates, and even that may be barely present. Under these conditions, detecting the presence of light matters more than identifying its hue. This is why many deep-sea animals are effectively colourblind. Their visual systems are tuned to a narrow range of wavelengths, usually those associated with bioluminescence. This specialisation makes them efficient detectors of flashes and glows, but it also narrows their perceptual world. They do not see a richly detailed environment. They see interruptions in darkness. This limitation shapes how predators hunt. Rather than scanning for shapes, they watch for light events or movement against a dark background. A sudden flash may indicate prey, signalling, feeding, or being disturbed. A faint glow might outline an organism that would otherwise be invisible. Vision becomes event-based. Nothing matters until something changes. For prey, this creates a very specific risk. Being visible does not require being brightly lit. It only requires creating a detectable contrast, a reflective surface catching a stray photon, a movement that interrupts a steady field of darkness, a glow that lasts a fraction of a second too long. In this context, even minimal visibility can be dangerous. Some deep-sea animals respond by reducing their reliance on vision altogether. Their eyes may be small, reduced, or absent. Instead, they depend on other senses such as mechanoreception, which detects vibrations and pressure changes, or chemoreception, which detects chemical cues. These senses operate independently of light and can function in complete darkness. For such animals, vision offers little advantage and maintaining eyes would be an unnecessary energy cost. This diversity in visual capability creates an uneven sensory landscape. Some predators can see faint light events over long distances, others cannot see at all. Prey species must navigate this uncertainty. An adaptation that works against one predator may fail against another. This is why invisibility in the deep sea is rarely absolute. It is probabilistic. It reduces risk rather than eliminating it. The physics of light at these depths further complicates vision. Water not only absorbs light, it also spreads it out. Even a point source of bioluminescence does not produce a sharp image. Light scatters, creating halos rather than beams. Edges blur. Direction becomes ambiguous. An observer may know that light is present, but not precisely where it originated. This uncertainty benefits prey as much as predators. A brief flash may reveal activity without revealing exact position. This scattering also means that visual range is extremely limited. In near total darkness, animals may only see what is very close to them. Encounters happen at short distances, often without warning. There is little time to react once something is detected. This favours strategies that prevent detection in the first place rather than relying on escape. Another important aspect of deep-sea vision is adaptation speed. Many deep-sea animals can adjust their sensitivity to light rapidly. Their eyes can become more or less sensitive depending on recent exposure. This allows them to detect faint signals without being overwhelmed by sudden brightness. However, this flexibility has limits. A strong light can temporarily blind an animal adapted to darkness, rendering it vulnerable. This vulnerability is one reason why artificial lighting has such a dramatic effect on deep-sea creatures. Bright lights used by submersibles overwhelm visual systems that evolved for darkness. Animals that are nearly invisible under natural conditions become starkly outlined. Their adaptations are not designed for such intensity. This again highlights how context-dependent deep-sea invisibility is. Bioluminescence adds another layer of complexity. In many cases, animals use light not to see, but to be seen in controlled ways. A flash may startle a predator. A glowing lure may attract prey. A brief signal may help locate a mate. But every use of light carries risk. It announces presence. It creates contrast. So bioluminescent signals are often tightly regulated in duration, intensity and direction. Some animals produce light only on parts of their bodies that face downward or inward, reducing the chance of being seen from a distance. Others emit light in patterns that confuse depth perception or create false targets. From the perspective of vision science, this is not communication in the human sense, it is manipulation of perception. Because seeing is so limited, deep-sea animals also rely heavily on prediction. They do not interpret a rich visual scene. They infer meaning from minimal cues. A single flash may indicate prey, predator, or noise. Decision-making must be fast and conservative. Many animals respond only when signals exceed certain thresholds, ignoring ambiguous information to avoid costly mistakes. This conservative approach reinforces the value of invisibility. If a prey animal can remain below detection thresholds most of the time, it will rarely trigger a response. It does not need to be perfectly hidden. It only needs to stay uninteresting. The limitations of vision also affect how animals are shaped. Eyes that are optimized for detecting light are often fixed in orientation. They may be tubular rather than spherical, focusing on a specific direction, usually upward. This reduces coverage but increases sensitivity where it matters most. Again, this reinforces the importance of silhouettes and outlines against faint background light. For animals with such visual systems, anything that reduces silhouette is beneficial. Transparency, low-density bodies, and soft shapes all contribute. Darkness does not eliminate vision. It narrows it, and in doing so, it makes certain forms of invisibility extraordinarily effective. What emerges from all this is a deep-sea visual world that is sparse, selective, and uncertain. Seeing is possible, but only in fragments. Being seen is possible, but often by accident rather than intention. This creates an environment where subtlety outperforms clarity, and where the best strategy is often to exist just below the level of notice. As we move forward, this understanding of vision sets the stage for another shift. If seeing in near total darkness is limited and unreliable, then colour, one of the most powerful visual tools near the surface, begins to lose its relevance entirely. and once colour stops mattering, the deep ocean finds new ways to make creatures disappear in plain sight. In the deep ocean, colour fades not as a dramatic event, but as a slow irrelevance. It does not vanish suddenly, it simply stops mattering. The rules that give colour meaning near the surface dissolve as light thins, leaving behind an environment where pigmentation no longer communicates what it once did. In this world, colour is not decoration, warning, or signal. It is, at best, a side effect. At worst, it is a liability. Colour only exists because light exists, more specifically because light of different wavelengths reaches an object, interacts with it, and reflects back to an observer. Near the surface, this process is rich and complex. Sunlight carries a full spectrum. Objects selectively absorb some wavelengths and reflect others, producing the colours we recognise. Red looks red because red wavelengths survive the journey to the eye. In the deep ocean, that journey becomes impossible for most colours. As depth increases, water acts like a filter that strips light away in a predictable order. Red light disappears first within the first few meters, orange follows, then yellow. By the time sunlight reaches a few hundred meters down, nearly all that remains is blue. This is not because blue is special in any expressive sense, but because its shorter wavelengths penetrate water more effectively. Everything else is absorbed along the way. Once those wavelengths are gone, colour loses its foundation. An object cannot appear red if no red light reaches it. It cannot appear yellow if yellow wavelengths are absent. At depth, even vividly coloured surface animals would appear grey or black, not because they have changed, but because the environment no longer supports their colours. In this context, pigmentation becomes visually meaningless. This has immediate consequences for survival strategies. Near the surface, colour can be used to communicate. Bright colours may warn predators of toxicity. Patterns may disrupt outlines or signal group membership. In the deep sea, none of this works reliably. If colour cannot be seen, it cannot warn, attract, or confuse. Any energy spent producing pigments that rely on absent wavelengths is effectively wasted. Evolution responds quickly to waste. Over time, deep-sea animals lose pigments that serve no function in their environment. Reds, yellows, and greens become rare. What remains are pigments that either absorb the remaining light or reflect it in controlled ways. Black becomes useful, not as a colour, but as an absorber. Dark pigments prevent stray photons from bouncing off the body and revealing its presence. Interestingly, red does not disappear entirely. It changes role. In the deep sea, red becomes one of the most effective forms of invisibility. Because red wavelengths are absent, red objects reflect almost nothing. To eyes adapted to blue-dominated light, red appears black. This makes red pigmentation an excellent camouflage. Many deep-sea animals that appear bright red when brought to the surface are, in their natural habitat, nearly invisible. This inversion highlights how context-dependent colour truly is. Red is not inherently bright or conspicuous. It is only so under specific lighting conditions. In the deep sea, red becomes a way to disappear. This explains why so many deep-sea crustaceans, fish, and invertebrates are red. What looks dramatic to us under artificial light is functionally dark in their world. Blue, despite being the last remaining colour of sunlight, is not especially useful either. Reflecting blue light risks detection, because blue is the dominant wavelength available. Animals that reflect it stand out against darker backgrounds. As a result, many deep-sea animals avoid reflective blue pigmentation. Instead, they either absorb blue light completely or manipulate it through transparency or internal scattering. This leaves very little room for conventional coloration. Patterning becomes difficult to maintain when contrast is low. Gradients fade into uniform darkness. What matters instead is reflectance. How much light does the body return to the environment and in what direction? The goal shifts from displaying colour to controlling light interaction. This shift also affects predators. Visual predators in the deep sea do not distinguish prey based on colour. Their eyes are not built for it. They are tuned to detect brightness changes and movement, not hue. A flash of light matters. A silhouette matters. A sudden change in intensity matters. Colour does not. This simplifies the visual world dramatically. Where surface environments are rich with visual information, the deep sea reduces vision to a narrow channel. Presence or absence, light or dark, movement or stillness. Under these conditions, colour adds nothing. Some animals retain pigments for reasons unrelated to vision. Pigments can protect tissues from damage, serve structural roles, or result from metabolic processes. In these cases, coloration persists not because it is seen, but because it serves other functions. However, even these pigments are often tuned to minimize reflectivity. Bioluminescence introduces a different dimension to colour, but even here the palette is limited. Most bioluminescent light is blue-green, matching the wavelengths that travel farthest underwater. This is not a stylistic choice. It is a physical constraint. Emitting light outside this range would be inefficient, as those wavelengths would be absorbed quickly and fail to travel. Because bioluminescence is often the only light source in deep environments, it sets the terms for visibility. Animals evolve visual systems that match the emission spectra of common bioluminescent signals. This creates a closed loop. Light is produced in certain wavelengths, because those wavelengths travel best. Eyes evolve to detect those wavelengths because they are most informative. Colour outside this loop remains irrelevant. This further marginalises pigmentation. If light in the environment is narrow in spectrum, and if eyes are tuned to that spectrum, then colour variation outside that range is invisible. It might as well not exist. There is also a behavioural consequence. Without colour as a reliable cue, animals rely more heavily on timing, motion, and intensity. A brief flash may communicate more than a complex pattern ever could. A sudden change in brightness can signal danger or opportunity. This reinforces the idea that invisibility is not just about appearance, but about managing events. Colour also loses meaning because of distance. In the deep sea, visual range is short. Objects are often detected only when they are very close. At such distances, subtle colour differences are difficult to resolve even under ideal conditions. In low light, they disappear entirely. This makes fine visual discrimination impractical. Animals that rely on it would gain little benefit. Over time, this environment selects for simplicity. Bodies become uniform in appearance. Patterns fade. Pigments that once served communication roles are lost. What remains is a visual system stripped down to essentials. This does not mean the deep sea is visually dull. It is visually efficient. Every signal has a purpose. Every photon matters. Light is used sparingly, carefully, and often deceptively. Colour, with its dependence on abundance and clarity, cannot compete under these constraints. From an evolutionary perspective, the loss of colour is not a loss at all. It is a refinement. It reflects a narrowing of options in response to physical limits. When light becomes scarce and unreliable, only strategies that operate within those limits persist. This also explains why deep-sea animals often look surprising when observed under human lighting. Bright lights reintroduce wavelengths that do not exist in their natural environment. Colours that evolve to be invisible suddenly become vivid. Reds blaze, purples emerge, patterns appear where none were meant to be seen. This can give the impression of extravagance, but it is an illusion created by the wrong context. In the deep sea, those colours are silent. They do not speak to predators or prey. They do not warn or attract. They simply exist, shaped by physics rather than perception. As colour fades from relevance, other visual properties take over. Darkness becomes a tool. Absorption becomes a strategy. Reflectivity becomes something to avoid. This sets the stage for the next shift in deep-sea invisibility, where animals do not just lose colour, but actively erase their presence by manipulating light itself. Once colour no longer carries information, the deep ocean turns its attention to contrast, shadow, and outline. And in that transition, some of the most striking adaptations emerge, built not around being seen differently, but around not being seen at all. In the deep ocean, colour does not behave the way intuition suggests. What appears bright and unmistakable at the surface can become invisible only a short distance below. What looks like pure darkness can vanish entirely when viewed under the right conditions. This inversion is one of the most effective and quietly elegant tricks life has developed in low light, and it explains why red that looks black and black, that seems to disappear, are so common among deep-sea creatures. Red is usually associated with visibility. On land, red stands out. It signals danger, ripeness, urgency. Underwater, near the surface, red still carries some of that presence, but water absorbs red wavelengths more efficiently than any other visible colour. Within the first few meters of descent, red light weakens dramatically. A little deeper, it is gone altogether. Once that happens, red objects no longer reflect anything meaningful. With no red light to reflect, red surfaces return almost no photons to the observer. In practical terms, this means that red becomes functionally black. Not dark red, not muted, simply black. A red fish at depth reflects as little light as a truly black one, sometimes even less. To an eye adapted to the blue-dominated light environment of the deep sea, red is indistinguishable from darkness. This makes red pigmentation one of the most effective forms of camouflage available in environments where red light is absent. This is why so many deep-sea animals that appear strikingly red under artificial lighting are nearly invisible in their natural habitat. Crustaceans, squid, jellyfish, and fish often display intense reds, maroons, and deep purples when brought to the surface. Under the blue-only light of the deep ocean, these colours collapse into shadow. What appears bold to us is quiet where it evolved. Red offers additional advantages beyond simple absorption. Because it reflects so little of the remaining light, it produces minimal contrast against the surrounding darkness. It does not shimmer, it does not highlight movement, it does not betray texture. Even subtle body motions are harder to detect when there is no reflected light to track them. This makes red particularly useful for animals that cannot rely on transparency. Larger animals, or those with dense tissues or internal structures that scatter light, may not be able to become fully transparent. Red pigmentation offers them an alternative route to invisibility. Instead of letting light pass through, they ensure that light does not return. Black operates under similar principles but with important differences. True black in the deep sea is not merely a colour. It is a surface property engineered to absorb light almost completely. Many deep-sea animals possess skin that absorbs more than 99% of incoming light. This is achieved through microscopic surface structures that trap photons, bouncing them internally until they are absorbed rather than reflected. These surfaces do not behave like ordinary dark materials. Under illumination, they do not appear shiny or even matte in the usual sense. They appear empty. When a bioluminescent flash hits them, there is no glare, no outline, no reflective cue to guide the observer's eye. The light simply fails to come back. This is particularly important because bioluminescence is one of the primary ways predators search for prey in the deep sea. A predator may emit light and watch for reflections. Prey with ordinary dark pigmentation might still reflect enough light to reveal their shape. Prey with ultra-black surfaces do not. To the predator, it is as if nothing is there. This strategy has been documented in several deep-sea fish species whose skin absorbs nearly all wavelengths of light, including those produced by common bioluminescent organisms. These fish are not merely dark, they are optically engineered to eliminate visibility under the specific lighting conditions of their environment. What makes this even more striking is that ultra-black surfaces are rare in nature outside the deep sea. On land, black materials still reflect some light. The deep ocean, with its reliance on bioluminescence rather than sunlight, creates unique pressures that drive the evolution of extreme absorption. Light is too valuable to waste. Reflecting it back to a predator is dangerous. The combination of red and black strategies creates a spectrum of invisibility. Red pigmentation works best where red light is absent but some blue light remains. Ultra-black absorption becomes more important where bioluminescence dominates. Many animals combine both, using red pigments in tissues and ultra-black surfaces externally to maximize concealment across different lighting conditions. This dual strategy reflects how variable the deep-sea light environment can be. At certain depths, faint ambient light may still exist. At others, darkness is broken only by occasional flashes. An animal that can remain invisible under both conditions gains a significant survival advantage. There is also an important behavioural component. Animals with red or black coloration often orient themselves to minimize exposure to light sources. They may position their bodies so that the most absorbent surfaces face outward. They may avoid movements that expose lighter, internal tissues. In some cases, body posture itself becomes part of the camouflage. Interestingly, red pigmentation can also play a role in communication among species that possess specialized vision. Some deep-sea predators have evolved visual systems capable of detecting red bioluminescence, a rare ability. This allows them to illuminate prey without being seen by most other animals. In response, prey species that are red appear invisible even under this illumination, reflecting little of the red light back to the predator. This creates a subtle evolutionary interplay. Red becomes invisible to most observers, and even to some that use red light. What began as a consequence of light absorption becomes a refined concealment strategy. Black too has layers of function. In addition to absorbing light, black surfaces can reduce internal scattering. When light enters a translucent or partially transparent body, it can reflect off internal structures and leak out, revealing shape. Ultra-black outer layers prevent this by absorbing light before it penetrates deeply. This is especially important for animals with complex internal anatomy that cannot be fully hidden. The effectiveness of black and red camouflage also depends on distance. In the deep sea, visual range is short. An object only needs to remain undetectable within a limited radius to avoid interaction. Red and black surfaces reduce detection within this critical range, even if they would be visible under different conditions or at closer distances. This reinforces a recurring theme. Deep-sea invisibility is not about perfection, it is about probability. Red that looks black and black that vanishes do not make animals absolutely invisible. They make them less likely to be seen, less likely to be noticed, and therefore less likely to be eaten. There is a cost to producing these pigments and surface structures, but it is far lower than the cost of being detected. In an environment where a single encounter can determine survival, these adaptations pay for themselves quickly. From a human perspective, the idea that bright red animals are effectively invisible can feel counterintuitive. Our visual system is tuned to air and sunlight. We interpret colour based on those assumptions. In the deep sea, those assumptions fail. Colour is not intrinsic, it is contextual. Remove the light, and the meaning changes completely. This is why deep-sea animals often seem to exist in a parallel visual reality. Their colours are not meant for us. They are shaped by wavelengths we rarely experience and conditions we cannot replicate easily. Under the wrong light, their camouflage collapses. Under the right one, they disappear. As this pattern becomes clearer, another element starts to matter more than colour or brightness. Shape, outline, the way a body interrupts light from above or reflects it back from below. This leads directly into the next layer of deep-sea invisibility, where animals do not rely on pigment alone, but manipulate silhouette and shadow to erase themselves from view. In the deep ocean, shape matters more than surface detail. Long before colour or texture can be resolved, an observer detects something far simpler, a a break in uniformity, a shadow where there should be none, a silhouette interrupting the faint glow from above. This is why, in low-light environments, the outline of a body can be more dangerous than any pattern painted across it. And this is where invisibility becomes less about what an animal looks like, and more about how it interrupts space. Unlike on land, the deep ocean has no fixed surfaces for shadows to fall on. There are no walls, no ground planes, no trees or rocks to catch light. Everything happens in open water. Shadows do not stretch across objects. They exist only as absences in a field of dim light. A body blocks photons coming from above, and that absence becomes visible to anything looking up. This single geometric fact shapes an enormous amount of deep-sea biology. Most remaining ambient light in the deep sea comes from one direction, above. Even hundreds of meters down, there is often a faint gradient, slightly brighter toward the surface, slightly darker below. Predators exploit this by positioning themselves underneath potential prey. From this vantage point, they do not need to see detail. They only need to detect a darker shape crossing that gradient. A silhouette is enough. This means that an animal can be perfectly camouflaged in every other way and still be detected if its outline is distinct. A sharp-edged body, a rigid profile, or a flat underside can betray presence instantly. Evolution responds to this by softening silhouettes. Bodies become rounded, tapered, or irregular. Appendages trail and flex. Hard edges are avoided. Anything that turns a crisp outline into a fuzzy boundary reduces the chance of detection. One of the simplest ways to manage silhouette is orientation. Many deep-sea animals orient their bodies vertically rather than horizontally. This aligns their longest dimension with the direction of light rather than cutting across it. From below, a vertically oriented body presents a much narrower profile. Less width means less shadow. Less shadow means lower visibility. This vertical orientation is common among midwater fish, squid, and gelatinous organisms. Even when these animals are long, their alignment minimizes the cross-sectional area that interrupts light. Some species adjust their posture dynamically, tilting or rotating in response to subtle changes in light direction or predator approach. Body shape plays an equally important role. Flattened forms that would be obvious in silhouette near the surface become liabilities in the deep sea. Instead, many animals develop cylindrical or teardrop-shaped bodies. These shapes produce gradual light gradients rather than abrupt shadows. The transition from light to dark becomes less distinct, harder for a visual system to interpret as a solid object. Transparency enhances this effect but does not replace it. A transparent body can still cast a shadow if its refractive properties differ enough from water. Internal organs can also create localized opacity. To address this, many transparent animals minimize internal complexity or arrange internal structures along the body's axis, reducing lateral disruption. The silhouette becomes less like an object and more like a slight distortion in the water. Some animals go further by breaking up their outline entirely. Long, thin appendages extend outward, creating shapes that resemble drifting debris or strings of particles rather than cohesive bodies. Siphonophores, for example, are colonies of repeated units stretched into long chains. From a distance, they do not read as a single organism. Their silhouette dissolves into fragments. Others use flexibility as camouflage. Soft-bodied animals deform constantly as currents move past them. Their shape is never stable long enough to be recognized easily. Visual systems are good at detecting consistent patterns. They are less effective when outlines change continuously. By refusing to hold a fixed form, these animals reduce the likelihood of being categorized as prey. Shadows themselves can also be manipulated. Some animals produce light on their undersides to erase shadows altogether, a strategy known as counterillumination. By emitting light that matches the intensity of the faint glow from above, they fill in the darkness their bodies would otherwise create. From below, the silhouette disappears. The animal does not become transparent. it becomes visually neutral. This requires precise control. Too much light creates a bright target. Too little leaves a shadow. Animals that use counterillumination adjust their output dynamically, responding to changes in ambient light caused by depth, time of day, or surface conditions. This is not a constant glow. It is a responsive system tuned to the visual geometry of the environment. Even animals that do not produce light benefit from shadow management. Rounded shapes reduce shadow contrast. Soft tissues scatter light internally, smoothing transitions. Dark pigmentation absorbs stray photons that might outline the body. Each of these features contributes to reducing silhouette clarity. It is important to recognize that shadows in the deep sea are not static. The faint light from above shifts with surface waves, weather, and time of day. This creates a constantly changing illumination pattern. Animals that can adjust their posture, orientation, or position in the water column can take advantage of these fluctuations. By aligning themselves with moments of lower contrast, they further reduce detectability. Predators, in turn, evolve to interpret these subtle cues. They become sensitive to slight inconsistencies in the light field, a shape that moves against the background, a shadow that appears and vanishes. This drives prey species to refine their strategies even further. Silhouettes become thinner, shapes become less regular, movements become slower and more deliberate. This is not about deception in the human sense. It is about minimizing information. A predator cannot act on what it cannot confidently interpret. If a shadow is ambiguous, it may not be worth pursuing. If a shape blends too well into the background, it may be ignored. This selective attention benefits prey enormously. In a sparse environment where encounters are rare, avoiding a single detection can mean survival for days, weeks, or months. The pressure to refine silhouette management is constant and cumulative. Interestingly, some animals exploit silhouettes deliberately. Predators may exaggerate their outline to intimidate or confuse prey at close range. Others may mimic the silhouettes of harmless objects or organisms, but these are exceptions. The dominant trend in the deep sea is toward erasure rather than display. From a broader perspective, silhouettes and shadows illustrate how invisibility is not just about materials or pigments. It is about geometry, about how bodies occupy space relative to light sources and observers. The deep ocean strips vision down to its simplest components, and life adapts accordingly. This also explains why deep-sea animals often appear so different when viewed from above versus from the side. A body that looks obvious under direct lighting may be nearly invisible when viewed from below under natural conditions. Our perspective changes everything. As we move deeper into the mechanisms of invisibility, it becomes clear that the deep ocean does not reward complexity for its own sake. It rewards alignment. Alignment with light direction. Alignment with water movement. Alignment with the limits of perception. And once silhouettes are softened and shadows erased, there remains one more powerful tool for manipulating visibility. Light itself, not as illumination, but as misdirection. In the deep sea, light is not only something to avoid, it is something that can be used carefully to make an animal even harder to find. In most places, light exists to show things. It reveals shapes, colours, edges, and movement. It tells the eye where to look and what matters. In the deep ocean, light is something else entirely. It is rare, controlled, and dangerous. And in one of the most unexpected turns in evolutionary strategy, many deep-sea creatures do not use light to make themselves visible. They use it to disappear. Bioluminescence is often imagined as a display. Glowing jellyfish, flashing fish, sparkling trails in dark water. From the outside it looks expressive, even decorative. But in the deep sea, bioluminescence is rarely about beauty, and almost never about illumination in the way we understand it. It is a tool, used precisely, sparingly, and often defensively. In many cases, It exists to cancel visibility rather than create it. To understand how light can erase rather than reveal, it helps to return to the basic problem of silhouettes. In the deep ocean, the faint remaining ambient light usually comes from above. Anything between that light and an observer below creates a shadow. Even a nearly transparent body can interrupt the light enough to produce a detectable outline. This is where bioluminescence enters as a countermeasure. Some deep-sea animals produce light on the underside of their bodies, emitting it downward rather than outward. This light is carefully matched in intensity and colour to the faint glow coming from above. When done correctly, it fills in the shadow the body would otherwise cast. From below, there is no silhouette. The animal blends into the background brightness so precisely that it becomes visually neutral. This strategy is known as counterillumination, and it is one of the most refined camouflage techniques in the ocean. Counterillumination does not require constant light. It requires control. The animal must adjust its light output as conditions change, as it moves up or down in the water column, as surface light grows stronger or weaker, as clouds pass overhead or waves alter light patterns. This demands sensory feedback and fine regulation. The glow is not fixed, it is responsive. Many fish, squid and crustaceans possess rows of light-producing organs along their ventral surfaces for this purpose. These organs are often shielded or directional, preventing light from escaping sideways or upward. The goal is not to glow. The goal is to erase evidence of presence. Light becomes a subtraction rather than an addition. What makes this even more remarkable is that bioluminescence is metabolically expensive. Producing light requires energy, chemical substrates, and specialized tissues. In an environment where energy is scarce, this cost must be justified. The fact that counterillumination evolves repeatedly tells us how valuable it is. Avoiding detection is worth the expense. Bioluminescence is also used to confuse rather than conceal directly. Some animals release clouds of glowing particles when threatened. These particles drift away, creating multiple points of light that obscure the animal's actual position. A predator may strike at the glow and miss the body entirely. In this case, light draws attention, but away from where it matters. Other species produce sudden flashes when disturbed. These flashes can overwhelm the visual systems of predators adapted to darkness, causing momentary disorientation. In that brief window, the prey may escape. The light does not help the predator see, it prevents it from seeing clearly. There are also cases where bioluminescence is used to create false silhouettes. Some animals have light-producing organs arranged to mimic the shape of eyes or other features. When illuminated, these patterns can mislead predators about orientation or size. A predator may aim for what appears to be the head and strike empty water. In all of these cases, light is not revealing truth. It is manipulating perception. It takes advantage of the limitations of deep-sea vision, where clarity is already compromised. A small disruption can have large effects. Another important role of bioluminescence in invisibility involves matching the environment rather than cancelling it. In regions where bioluminescent flashes are common, a glowing organism may not stand out if its light resembles background noise. If everything flashes occasionally, a controlled glow may blend in rather than attract attention. Some species exploit this by timing their light emissions to coincide with other bioluminescent activity. This creates a paradoxical situation. In total darkness, light reveals. In partial darkness filled with biological light, light can conceal. Context determines meaning. The colour of bioluminescence also matters. Most deep-sea bioluminescence is blue-green, because those wavelengths travel farthest underwater. This also matches the sensitivity of most deep-sea eyes. However, some predators have evolved the ability to see red light, which is otherwise invisible at depth. These predators can illuminate prey with red bioluminescence without alerting most other animals. In response, prey species that are red pigmented remain invisible even under red illumination. Their bodies absorb red light rather than reflecting it. This creates a layered invisibility. To most animals, the prey is invisible because red light does not exist. To the predator using red light, the prey is still invisible because it does not reflect it. Light is present, but information is not. This interplay highlights how bioluminescence and pigmentation co-evolve. Light production and light absorption are part of the same visual system, even when they occur in different species. The deep sea is full of these feedback loops, where one adaptation creates pressure for another, and invisibility becomes increasingly refined. Bioluminescence also allows animals to control when they are visible. Unlike pigmentation or body shape, light can be switched on and off. This temporal control is powerful. An animal can remain completely dark and undetectable most of the time, then emit light only when necessary, for signaling, for feeding, for defense. The rest of the time, it disappears back into darkness. This selectivity reduces risk. It also allows animals to operate in environments that would otherwise be unusable. A predator that uses a bioluminescent lure can attract prey in complete darkness. But once the prey arrives, the predator must still avoid being seen by larger hunters. Light must be directed and contained. Many deep-sea predators have bioluminescent lures positioned away from their bodies. A glowing appendage draws attention while the rest of the body remains dark. When prey approaches the light, it comes within striking distance without ever seeing the predator's outline. Again, light is used to reveal something other than the truth. From a physical standpoint, bioluminescence is efficient in the deep sea because there is so little competing light. Even a small glow can be effective. This allows for subtle signals rather than bright displays. It also means that excessive light is dangerous. Animals that glow too brightly become beacons. This constraint shapes how bioluminescence is distributed on the body. Light organs are often recessed, shielded, or covered by tissues that limit spread. The emitted light may be narrow in angle, directed downward or forward rather than outward. This precision reduces unintended visibility. The deep ocean thus turns light into a scalpel rather than a floodlight. It is used to carve perception, not to illuminate reality. Seeing becomes a matter of interpreting intentional signals rather than passively receiving information. From an evolutionary perspective, this redefinition of light is profound. It shows that invisibility is not just about removing signals, it is about controlling them. An animal that cannot avoid producing some detectable cues may still survive by shaping how those cues are perceived. This also reinforces why deep-sea life often feels so alien. Our relationship with light is fundamentally different. We assume light equals knowledge. In the deep ocean, light equals risk. The safest state is darkness. Light is tolerated only when it serves a specific purpose, and even then, it is used cautiously. As we continue forward, the use of bioluminescence to erase silhouettes leads naturally into an even more precise application of this principle. Some animals do not just fill in shadows, they actively sculpt the light field around them to create the illusion of empty water. This next step takes the idea of invisibility beyond passive concealment and into active visual deception, where the ocean itself seems to forget that a body is there at all. In the deep ocean, there is a particular kind of invisibility that goes beyond blending in or fading away. It is not about becoming dark or transparent, it is about becoming visually neutral, present, but indistinguishable from the water itself. Counterillumination is the clearest expression of this idea, and it represents one of the most precise and quietly sophisticated survival strategies ever produced by evolution. To understand why counterillumination is so effective, it helps to return once again to the basic geometry of light underwater. In most of the deep ocean, any ambient light that exists arrives from above. Even when it is extremely faint, it creates a subtle brightness gradient. Brighter upward, darker downward. Predators exploit this by looking up. They are not searching for colour or detail, they are scanning for interruptions. Anything that blocks that downward light creates a shadow, and that shadow reads as food. A body drifting through this gradient is by default a problem. No matter how transparent or dark it is, it still occupies space, it still displaces light. Even a soft, water-rich body can cast a detectable silhouette if it blocks enough photons. Counterillumination exists to solve this final problem. Instead of trying to block less light, the animal replaces the missing light. This is the illusion of empty water. Animals that use counterillumination produce light along their undersides, carefully calibrated to match the brightness of the ambient light from above. When viewed from below, the light emitted by the animal fills in the shadow its body would otherwise create. The visual system of the observer receives a continuous field of brightness, uninterrupted. There is no silhouette, there is no object, there is only water. This is not simple glowing, it is optical matching. The animal must emit the right amount of light, in the right direction, at the right time. Too much light creates a bright target, too little leaves a shadow. The effectiveness of counterillumination depends on precision, not intensity. Many deep-sea fish, squid, and crustaceans have evolved rows of specialized light-producing organs called photophores along their ventral surfaces. These photophores are not randomly distributed. They are positioned where shadows would be most visible. They are often directional, emitting light downward while shielding it from spreading sideways or upward. Some are covered by lenses or reflective layers that shape the beam. Control is everything. The animal must constantly adjust its output as conditions change. If it moves upward, ambient light increases and its counterillumination must brighten. If it sinks deeper, the glow must dim. If clouds pass overhead far above the surface, altering the light field, adjustments must follow. This requires sensory input and rapid feedback. In many species, photophores are connected to visual systems that monitor ambient light levels. The animal is, in effect, measuring the brightness of the world above it and reproducing that brightness below its body. This creates a dynamic camouflage system that adapts in real time. The result is striking. When counterillumination is working properly, an animal can be almost impossible to detect from below, even at close range. Predators scanning upwards see no interruption. The water appears empty. The prey is not hidden behind something. It is visually erased. This erasure is particularly effective in the midwater zones, where there is no seafloor or surface to provide visual reference points. In open water, the visual field is already sparse. A continuous gradient with no contrast is interpreted as absence. There is nothing to fixate on, nothing to pursue. Counterillumination also benefits animals that cannot rely on transparency or darkness alone. Larger bodies, complex internal structures, or reflective tissues may still produce detectable shadows, even if pigmentation is optimized. Counterillumination compensates for these limitations. It allows animals with otherwise visible bodies to neutralize their silhouettes. This does not mean counterillumination replaces other camouflage strategies. It layers on top of them. Animals that use it are often also dark, red, or transparent. The glow does not make them visible because it is confined to specific angles and intensities. From the side or above, these animals remain difficult to detect. From below, they vanish. There is an important behavioral aspect to this strategy as well. Animals that use counterillumination often maintain specific orientations. They keep their ventral side facing downward. They adjust posture to keep photophores aligned with the direction of observation. This reinforces the illusion. If the body were to tilt too far, the glow would no longer align properly, and the silhouette could reappear. Some species also modulate their behavior to reduce the need for constant illumination. They may descend deeper during brighter periods and ascend during darker ones. This reduces the range of light levels they must match, conserving energy. Counterillumination is powerful, but it is not free. Producing light consumes resources, and deep-sea animals are careful spenders. energy constraints shape the design of photophores themselves. They are often small and efficient, producing just enough light to do their job. Chemical reactions are optimized for low energy loss. Light output is regulated tightly. This efficiency reflects the same principles seen throughout deep-sea biology. Do only what is necessary, nothing more. Counterillumination also interacts with predator behavior in subtle ways. Predators relying on silhouettes may become less sensitive to faint contrasts if they encounter many false negatives. Over time, this could influence hunting strategies, pushing predators to rely more on other cues such as motion, bioluminescent flashes, or chemical signals. In response, prey species refine their camouflage further. This feedback loop drives increasing sophistication. It is worth noting that counterillumination does not make animals invisible from all perspectives. A predator approaching from the side or above may still detect the animal, depending on lighting and distance. But in the deep sea, most visually oriented predators hunt from below. Counterillumination targets the most common and most dangerous viewpoint. It reduces risk where it matters most. This selective invisibility reinforces an important idea. Deep-sea camouflage is not about universal concealment. It is about managing probability. Reducing the most likely detection pathways. Counterillumination addresses one of the most reliable detection cues in the deep ocean. By erasing silhouettes, it removes a primary trigger for predatory response. There is also an interesting perceptual aspect to this illusion. Visual systems evolved to interpret gradients as empty space. A smooth field of brightness without interruption suggests distance or absence. When counterillumination fills in a shadow perfectly, the observer's brain does not register an object, it registers continuity. This is not just physical camouflage, it is cognitive camouflage. The illusion of empty water is powerful because it aligns with how vision works under constraint. In low light, the brain relies heavily on contrast. Remove contrast and perception falters. Counterillumination exploits this vulnerability. Some animals take this idea even further by adjusting not just brightness, but spectral quality. Their emitted light matches the colour of ambient light precisely. This prevents colour contrast from revealing their presence. In environments dominated by blue light, the glow is blue. In slightly different conditions, it shifts accordingly. The precision of this matching suggests that deep-sea animals are not just passive recipients of environmental pressure. They are active participants in shaping how they are perceived. Their bodies do not merely endure the deep ocean, they collaborate with it. This collaboration becomes especially evident during vertical migrations. As animals move up and down through different light zones, their counterillumination systems adapt continuously. The illusion remains intact across changing conditions. The water above always appears empty, even as the animal travels through it. From a human perspective, this can be difficult to appreciate fully. Our experience with light is dominated by abundance. We're used to environments where visibility is high and concealment requires effort. In the deep sea, visibility is fragile and concealment is the default. Counterillumination is an extension of that default state, refined to an extraordinary degree. It also reveals something about how evolution operates under strict constraints. There is no room for waste, no tolerance for excess. Solutions must be precise, efficient, and reliable. Counterillumination meets these criteria. It uses the environment's own properties against it, turning ambient light into a tool of erasure. As we move forward, the implications of this strategy ripple outward. If silhouettes can be erased and shadows filled in, then the deep ocean becomes a place where even active hunters struggle to locate their targets. This raises an obvious question. How do predators hunt in a world where prey can make itself disappear so effectively? The answer lies in a new set of adaptations, ones that focus less on visual detail and more on detecting the faintest hints of presence. And in response, prey species refine their invisibility even further, not by eliminating light entirely, but by shaping how and when it appears. In a world where light is scarce and prey works tirelessly to erase itself from view, predators face a fundamental challenge. They must hunt without certainty. They must act on incomplete information, interpreting fragments rather than images, probabilities rather than clear signals. In the deep ocean, hunting is not about seeing everything. It is about noticing just enough. Predators here cannot rely on the visual dominance that surface hunters enjoy. There are no long sight lines, no clear silhouettes at distance, no reliable colour cues. Even bioluminescence when present is fleeting and often deceptive. As a result, deep-sea predators evolve under a very different set of rules. Their success depends not on visual clarity, but on sensitivity, patience, and the ability to respond to subtle disturbances in an environment designed to hide them. One of the most important shifts in deep-sea predation is the move away from image-based vision. Instead of forming detailed pictures of prey, many predators focus on detecting changes in the environment. A slight movement against drifting particles, a brief flash where none should be, a pressure wave travelling through the water. These cues are not specific. They do not identify species or size with certainty. They simply suggest presence. This means that deep-sea predators often operate with a high tolerance for ambiguity. They investigate signals that might lead to food, knowing that many will not. Energy efficiency becomes critical. Chasing every possible cue would be unsustainable. Predators must decide which signals are worth pursuing and which can be ignored. This decision-making process shapes both behaviour and anatomy. Eyes, where they exist, are often specialised rather than generalised. Some predators have tubular eyes fixed upward, optimised to detect silhouettes or faint glows above them. These eyes sacrifice peripheral vision and detail in favour of sensitivity. Others have large spherical eyes capable of gathering as much light as possible from all directions. Still others have reduced eyes entirely, relying on non-visual senses. Mechanoreception plays a major role. The movement of water carries information. Even a slow-moving prey animal displaces water, creating pressure changes that can be detected by specialised sensory systems. Lateral line systems in fish and similar structures in invertebrates allow predators to sense motion without seeing it. In near darkness, this sense can be more reliable than vision. Chemical detection is another critical tool. Prey animals release chemical cues through waste products, damaged tissues, or reproductive signals. These cues disperse through the water, creating gradients that predators can follow. Chemical sensing is slow compared to vision, but it works in complete darkness and does not require direct contact. It allows predators to narrow down regions of interest before committing energy to closer investigation. Sound and vibration also matter. Although sound travels efficiently underwater, pinpointing its source can be difficult. Deep-sea predators are often sensitive to low-frequency vibrations that indicate movement or feeding activity. These vibrations may not reveal exact position, but they suggest opportunity. Because no single sense is reliable on its own, deep-sea predators integrate multiple inputs, a faint glow combined with a pressure wave, a chemical trace coinciding with movement. Individually, these signals might be ignored. Together, they justify action. Hunting becomes a process of accumulation rather than confirmation. This sensory uncertainty has profound consequences. Predators cannot afford to be overly selective. When food is scarce, hesitation can be costly. As a result, many deep-sea predators have large mouths relative to their body size. They do not need to identify prey precisely. They simply need to capture it once it comes within reach. Anything that fits is consumed. This explains the prevalence of expandable jaws, flexible skulls, and distensible stomachs among deep-sea predators. These adaptations allow them to take advantage of rare opportunities without precise targeting. If something is detected and captured, it must not be wasted. The cost of passing up food may be greater than the cost of eating something suboptimal. Ambush is another common strategy. Instead of actively searching, Predators position themselves where prey is likely to pass. They drift motionless, blending into the background, conserving energy. When a prey animal comes close enough, detection does not require long-range vision. The predator responds to immediate cues and strikes. This behavior mirrors the invisibility strategies of prey. Predators also benefit from not being seen. Many deep-sea hunters are themselves dark, transparent, or counterilluminated. They must avoid being detected by both prey and larger predators. Hunting and hiding are not opposing strategies in the deep sea, they are intertwined. Some predators use bioluminescence offensively. A glowing lure attracts prey that mistake the light for food or a mate. This bypasses the need for detection entirely. Prey comes to the predator. But even here, precision matters. The lure must be convincing. It must not reveal the predator's body. Light is confined to a small, distant appendage, keeping the rest of the animal hidden. Other predators use bursts of light to momentarily illuminate prey at close range. This is risky. The flash can attract unwanted attention, but when successful, it provides just enough information to guide a strike. The predator does not need to see the prey clearly for long. A fraction of a second is enough. This reliance on momentary information reinforces why prey species invest so heavily in invisibility. If detection windows are brief and rare, reducing the frequency of those windows dramatically improves survival. Predators may be efficient within those windows, but they cannot act on what they never detect. The uncertainty predators face also influences their behavior after a failed attempt. In surface environments, predators may pursue fleeing prey over long distances. In the deep sea, pursuit is often short-lived or abandoned entirely. Losing track of prey is easy. Energy costs rise quickly. Many predators strike once and, if unsuccessful, return to waiting. This dynamic favours prey that can confuse or disrupt detection at the moment of attack. A sudden flash of light, a rapid change in direction, a release of glowing particles. These actions do not need to guarantee escape. They only need to break the predator's limited sensory lock long enough for the prey to drift out of range. Predators adapt to this as well. Some develop faster strike responses, minimizing the time between detection and capture. Others improve their ability to track motion over very short distances, but the fundamental constraint remains. Without clear visual information, hunting is probabilistic. This probabilistic nature of predation helps explain why deep-sea ecosystems can sustain such extreme forms of invisibility. If predators required clear, consistent visual confirmation to hunt successfully, prey would have little chance. Instead, both sides operate under uncertainty. Success rates are low, encounters are rare, survival depends on long-term averages rather than constant victories. From an evolutionary perspective, this balance stabilizes the system. Predators do not eliminate prey populations entirely because detection is difficult. Prey do not eliminate predators because energy constraints limit predatory efficiency. Invisibility becomes a shared condition shaping both sides. It is also worth noting that deep-sea predators often have slower metabolisms than their surface counterparts. They do not need to hunt constantly. A single successful capture may sustain them for extended periods. This reduces pressure to detect prey frequently, and allows predators to wait patiently for rare opportunities. This patience further benefits invisible prey. If predators are not actively searching, remaining undetected becomes easier. Stillness and subtlety are rewarded. Movement becomes the primary risk. As we look deeper into this relationship, it becomes clear that invisibility is not a one-sided advantage. It shapes the entire food web. Predators evolve to hunt what they cannot fully see. Prey evolve to exploit the limits of perception. The result is an ecosystem defined by restraint, ambiguity, and careful energy management. This brings us naturally to the other side of the equation. If predators are hunting under uncertainty, then prey survival depends not just on being hard to detect, but on leaving as little trace as possible once detected. It is not enough to avoid being seen, one must also avoid being followed, tracked, or remembered. And that leads us into the strategies prey use to survive in a world where even partial detection can be dangerous. In the deep ocean, survival as prey is not about outrunning danger or overpowering it. It is about erasing yourself from the moment before danger fully takes shape. Predators here rarely see clearly. They sense, they infer, they act on fragments. For prey, this creates a narrow window of vulnerability, and the most effective response is to leave nothing behind that can be followed, interpreted, or confirmed. Leaving no visual trace does not mean becoming completely invisible at all times. That is unrealistic. Instead, it means ensuring that any moment of visibility is brief, ambiguous, and difficult to use. A predator may notice something, but not enough to commit. Or it may detect a cue, but lose it immediately. In a world governed by uncertainty, this is often sufficient. One of the most important aspects of this strategy is minimizing contrast over time. A prey animal that remains visually consistent, even if faintly visible, may be tracked by a predator that can integrate information across moments. But an animal that appears only briefly, then dissolves back into the background, becomes much harder to pursue. This is why many deep-sea prey species move intermittently rather than continuously. Long periods of stillness are punctuated by short, controlled movements. Each movement is calculated to be just enough to reposition, not enough to draw sustained attention. Transparency plays a role here, but it is only the starting point. A transparent body can still be detected if it moves too abruptly, or if internal structures catch light. To reduce this risk, many prey species synchronize their movements with environmental noise. When surrounding particles shift due to currents, the prey moves as well. When bioluminescent flashes from other organisms light up the water briefly, the prey uses that moment to change position. Visibility becomes lost in the crowd. This strategy depends on patience. Prey animals often wait for the right conditions before acting. In the deep sea, waiting is not passive. It is an active survival behavior. Energy is conserved. Risk is minimized. The environment is allowed to do most of the work. Another key tactic is reducing visual persistence. Even if a predator detects a prey animal, tracking it requires continuity. The predator must be able to follow a signal from one moment to the next. Prey disrupt this by changing direction slowly, altering depth slightly, or adjusting orientation to break silhouettes. These changes do not look dramatic. They simply prevent the predator from maintaining a clear trajectory. Some prey species exploit the limits of predator memory. In low-information environments, predators rely on short-term sensory impressions. If a signal disappears quickly enough, it may not be stored or acted upon. A prey animal that becomes undetectable within seconds can effectively reset the encounter. The predator returns to waiting and the prey survives. Visual trace also includes reflection. Even a transparent or dark body can reflect light under certain angles. Many prey species have surfaces designed to scatter light internally, rather than reflect it back toward the source. Microstructures on the skin disrupt smooth reflection, diffusing light in unpredictable directions. This reduces the chance that a predator will receive a coherent signal. In some cases, prey animals actively shed visual information. Glowing secretions released during an encounter create a temporary distraction. The predator's attention is drawn to the brightest cue, which is no longer the prey itself. Once the glowing material disperses, there is no clear path back to the animal. The visual trace ends abruptly. This tactic is especially effective in the deep sea because light events are rare and significant. A predator encountering a sudden glow is likely to focus on it. When that glow detaches from the prey, the predator commits to the wrong target. The prey does not need to outrun the predator. It only needs to redirect its attention. Another way prey eliminate visual trace is by controlling orientation relative to light sources. Many species adjust their body angle to minimize silhouette exposure immediately after movement. If a prey animal must move, it does so in a way that quickly re-establishes a low-contrast profile. This may involve rotating vertically, aligning with the light gradient, or drifting into slightly darker layers. Depth itself becomes a tool. A small vertical shift can change ambient light enough to break visual continuity. Predators adapted to specific light conditions may lose sensitivity if prey move just beyond optimal detection zones. Prey that can tolerate a wider range of depths gain flexibility. They can disappear not by distance, but by context. Prey animals also benefit from simplicity. Bodies with fewer distinct features produce fewer visual cues. Smooth, amorphous shapes are harder to categorize. Predators may detect something but fail to recognize it as prey. Recognition matters. Detection alone does not guarantee pursuit. If a signal does not fit a known prey profile, it may be ignored. This is why many deep-sea prey species look unfinished or indistinct. They lack sharp features. Their forms blur into the water. To a predator, they may not register as edible objects at all. They become part of the background rather than a target within it. Behavior reinforces this effect. Many prey species avoid repetitive movements that could create recognizable patterns. Their actions are irregular, spaced out, and unpredictable. This prevents predators from learning or anticipating behavior. In an environment where learning is costly and encounters are rare, unpredictability becomes protective. Chemical invisibility also supports visual erasure. Prey that minimize metabolic waste reduce the chemical trails predators might follow after losing visual contact. Without a chemical gradient to guide pursuit, the predator has no way to relocate the prey. Visual disappearance becomes permanent rather than temporary. This combination of visual, behavioral, and chemical strategies creates a layered defense. No single adaptation guarantees survival. Together, they drastically reduce the likelihood of a successful hunt. The prey does not need to win every encounter, it only needs to avoid being eaten long enough to reproduce. This approach explains why deep-sea prey often lack dramatic escape responses. There is no sudden burst of speed, no sharp turn. Those actions would create strong visual and mechanical signals. Instead, escape is quiet, gradual, almost boring, and that is precisely why it works. From a broader perspective, prey strategies in the deep sea reflect a shift in survival philosophy. Rather than reacting forcefully to threats, prey aim to prevent threats from fully forming. They reduce the clarity of the predator's world. They make it harder for danger to coalesce into action. This also reshapes how we think about predator-prey relationships. In surface environments, these interactions are dynamic and visible. Chases, struggles, escapes. In the deep sea, much of the interaction never happens. Predators wait, prey drift, signals appear and vanish. Decisions are made silently, often to do nothing. The result is an ecosystem where survival depends on restraint. The prey that thrive are those that leave the smallest footprint on their environment. They do not announce their presence. They do not linger in perception. They pass through moments without imprint. As we continue, this idea of minimal presence begins to influence even the sensory systems of prey themselves. When visibility is dangerous, seeing too much can also be a liability. The next layer of this story explores how some deep-sea animals adjust not just how they are seen, but how they see, reshaping perception itself to match a world where absence is often safer than awareness. In the deep ocean, having better vision does not always mean seeing more. In many cases, it means seeing less, but interpreting that limited information with greater precision. Where light is scarce and unreliable, the goal of a visual system shifts. It is no longer about constructing a detailed picture of the environment. It is about extracting meaning from fragments. This is why many deep-sea animals have eyes that appear reduced, simplified, or oddly specialized, yet are remarkably effective within the narrow constraints they face. At first glance, this can seem counterintuitive. Darkness suggests a need for bigger eyes, wider pupils, and greater sensitivity. And in some species, this is exactly what we find. But alongside those adaptations, there is another trend moving in the opposite direction. Some deep-sea animals have smaller eyes than their shallow water relatives. Others have eyes that lack the ability to form sharp images. Still others have lost functional eyes altogether. This is not failure, it is refinement. Vision costs energy. Building eyes requires resources. Maintaining neural tissue requires constant metabolic investment. Processing visual information requires complex brain structures. In an environment where food is limited and visual information is sparse, these costs must be justified. If seeing more detail does not lead to better decisions, then that investment is wasted. Evolution responds by trimming excess. For many deep-sea animals, the most useful visual information is extremely simple. Is there light or not? Is something moving or not? Is there a change in brightness large enough to suggest a nearby organism? Fine detail adds little value. Color discrimination adds none. Sharp focus is unnecessary when objects can only be detected at short range. Under these conditions, eyes evolve to do one thing well rather than many things poorly. This leads to visual systems that prioritize sensitivity over resolution. Rod cells dominate retinas. Cones, which support color vision and fine detail, are reduced or absent. Neural circuits emphasize contrast detection and motion rather than image formation. The eye becomes a detector rather than a camera. In some species, this specialization becomes extreme. Tubular eyes, for example, are common among certain deep-sea fish. These eyes are elongated and fixed in orientation, often pointing upward. They sacrifice field of view for sensitivity in a specific direction. The animal cannot see everything around it, but it can see very well in the direction that matters most, where silhouettes and faint glows are likely to appear. This directional focus reflects a broader principle. In the deep sea, information is directional. Light comes from above. Bioluminescent flashes often occur in specific regions. Motion tends to follow currents. Eyes that are generalized and flexible may not be as effective as eyes that are optimized for the most informative angle. Seeing less overall can mean understanding more where it counts. Other animals take a different approach. Instead of improving vision, they reduce reliance on it. Some deep-sea crustaceans and fish have small, simple eyes that provide minimal visual input. They use vision only as a secondary sense, supplementing mechanoreception, chemoreception, and pressure sensing. For these animals, vision confirms presence rather than identifies objects. This reduced visual dependence can actually improve decision-making. When visual information is sparse and ambiguous, relying on it too heavily can lead to mistakes. False alarms waste energy. Missed cues are dangerous. By limiting visual input, animals reduce noise and focus on signals that are more reliable in their environment. There is also a behavioral dimension to this. Animals with limited vision tend to move less and wait more. They do not actively scan the environment. They allow information to come to them. This aligns with the overall energy-saving strategy of the deep sea. Waiting costs less than searching. Responding only to strong signals reduces unnecessary action. Even among animals with well-developed eyes, visual processing is often conservative. Thresholds for response are high. Minor fluctuations in light or motion are ignored. Only changes that exceed a certain level trigger behavior. This reduces the chance of reacting to background noise. It also means that prey animals that remain just below those thresholds can persist undetected. This selective perception benefits both predators and prey. Predators avoid wasting energy on false targets. Prey avoid triggering responses by minimizing their signals. The visual system becomes a filter rather than a window. Some deep-sea animals also show evidence of temporal integration rather than spatial detail. Their visual systems may be better at detecting changes over time than differences across space. A brief flash followed by darkness may be more informative than a static image. This makes sense in an environment where bioluminescence dominates and events are fleeting. In such systems, memory and interpretation matter more than immediate clarity. The animal does not need to see a prey item clearly. It needs to recognize that a particular pattern of flashes or movements often leads to food. Understanding emerges from association rather than direct observation. This is where the idea of seeing less but understanding more becomes most apparent. Deep-sea vision is not about reconstructing the world as it is. It is about extracting meaning from minimal cues. The eye provides limited input. The brain fills in patterns based on experience and probability. Interestingly, this approach mirrors how humans perceive in low-light conditions. In near darkness, we rely less on detail and more on expectation. We see shapes where we expect them. We interpret movement cautiously. The deep sea extends this logic into a permanent state. Some animals push this even further by abandoning image-based vision entirely. Species living in the deepest, darkest zones may have eyes that detect only light intensity, not direction or form. These eyes function more like light meters than cameras. They tell the animal whether light is present and how strong it is. This information may be used to regulate behavior, such as when to emit bioluminescence or when to remain still. In extreme cases, eyes become vestigial. Cave-dwelling analogues exist in the ocean, where animals living in perpetual darkness lose functional vision over evolutionary time. Maintaining eyes offers no benefit when light is absent. Other senses take over completely. This loss of vision is not always permanent across a lineage. Some species retain visual capability during certain life stages and lose it later. Larval forms may have functional eyes while living in shallower waters. As they descend into deeper zones, vision becomes less useful, and eyes may reduce or change function. This life stage specificity highlights how adaptable sensory systems can be. Vision is not a fixed trait. It responds to environmental context. Where light exists, it is used. Where it does not, it is abandoned or repurposed. There is also an important interaction between vision and invisibility strategies. Animals that rely less on vision are less likely to be distracted by subtle cues. They are harder to lure visually. This can influence predator-prey dynamics. Prey that use bioluminescent distractions may be more effective against visually oriented predators than against those that rely on other senses. Similarly, predators that depend heavily on vision may be more susceptible to camouflage strategies like transparency and counterillumination. Predators that rely on mechanoreception or chemical cues may bypass those defenses. This creates diversity in hunting strategies and prevents any single invisibility tactic from becoming universally effective. From an evolutionary standpoint, this diversity stabilizes the system. If all predators saw perfectly, invisibility would fail. If all prey were invisible, predators would starve. The balance emerges from partial effectiveness on both sides. The phrase, "understand more," also applies at a population level. Over generations, species adapt their behavior based on what their sensory systems can reliably detect. Visual cues that are inconsistent are ignored. Reliable cues are emphasized. Understanding emerges not from individual insight but from statistical survival over time. This perspective reframes how we think about intelligence and perception. In the deep sea, intelligence is not about processing large amounts of information. It is about making good decisions with very little. Vision that sees less but understands more is optimized for this challenge. It is also worth noting that deep-sea animals do not experience their environment as empty or impoverished. To them, it is rich with subtle signals. Pressure changes, chemical gradients, faint light events. Their sensory world is not reduced, it is rebalanced. Human observers often mistake reduced vision for deficiency because we privilege sight above all other senses. In the deep sea, sight is only one tool among many, and not always the most important one. Animals that see less visually may perceive more holistically. As we continue deeper into this topic, the implications of sensory limitation become even broader. When vision is constrained, the environment itself begins to shape how evolution proceeds. Selection favours traits that align with what can be detected and what cannot. This leads naturally into the next layer of the story. Over long spans of time, the pressure to remain unseen and the limits of perception do more than shape individual species. They shape entire evolutionary pathways. Invisibility stops being a trick and becomes a trend, one that repeats across unrelated lineages again and again, guided by the same environmental rules. In the deep ocean, invisibility is not a rare advantage, it is a recurring outcome. When similar traits appear again and again in unrelated species, across different lineages and time periods, it signals something powerful at work, not coincidence, not imitation, but pressure. The kind of pressure that steadily reshapes life toward the same solutions, even when starting from very different beginnings. Evolution does not plan. It does not aim for elegance or efficiency in the abstract. It simply preserves what works often enough to matter. In the deep sea, what works is not standing out. What works is remaining unremarkable, difficult to notice and easy to overlook. Over millions of years, this simple rule produces a clear pattern. Life drifts toward invisibility. This pressure begins with the environment itself. Light is scarce, food is unpredictable, encounters are rare but decisive. In such conditions, the cost of being detected is high, while the benefit of being visible is low. There is little to gain from display, no sunlight to advertise colour, no dense communities where signalling improves social coordination. The balance tips heavily in one direction, reduce detection, or be removed from the gene pool. What makes this pressure especially strong is that it operates continuously. It does not require dramatic events. It does not need catastrophic predation spikes or sudden environmental change. Every generation, individuals that are slightly less visible survive marginally more often. They feed a little longer, they reproduce a little more successfully. Over time, these small differences accumulate. Subtle traits become standard. Standard traits become defining features. This is why invisibility in the deep sea often appears understated rather than extreme. Bodies do not vanish completely, they become quieter, less reflective, less contrasting, less distinct. Evolution rarely leaps, it nudges. And in an environment governed by perception thresholds, even small nudges matter. One of the most telling signs of this pressure is convergent evolution. Transparency evolves independently in jellyfish, fish larvae, crustaceans, and cephalopods. Red pigmentation appears in unrelated groups. Ultra-black surfaces evolve in multiple deep-sea fish lineages. Counterillumination emerges in animals with very different body plans. These species do not share a recent common ancestor with these traits. They share a problem. The problem is being seen. This convergence tells us that invisibility is not a niche adaptation tied to specific diets or behaviours. It is a general response to a shared environment. When light behaves a certain way and predators hunt in certain patterns, there are only so many viable solutions. Evolution explores them repeatedly, arriving at similar outcomes from different starting points. This pressure does not act on appearance alone. It shapes physiology, behaviour, life history, and even reproduction. Animals evolve slower metabolisms to reduce movement. They time feeding to minimize exposure. They reproduce in ways that limit the need for visual contact. Invisibility becomes integrated into how life functions, not just how it looks. There is also a feedback loop at work. As prey become harder to see, predators must adapt. They improve sensitivity. They rely on additional senses. They refine hunting strategies. But these adaptations do not eliminate the advantage of invisibility. They simply raise the bar. Prey species that remain just below detection thresholds continue to survive. The pressure persists. Importantly, this pressure is asymmetric. Predators benefit from better detection, but they do not benefit from being visible themselves. Predators also face predation. Larger hunters hunt smaller hunters. Visibility increases risk at every level. As a result, invisibility propagates upward through the food web. Not just prey, but predators evolve to be less noticeable. This creates a deep-sea ecosystem where almost everything is trying not to be seen by something else. Invisibility is not limited to the bottom of the food chain. It is a shared condition. The evolutionary consequences of this are profound. Traits that increase visibility are consistently selected against, unless they offer overwhelming benefit. Bright displays, rigid outlines, constant movement, loud signals. These features may exist briefly, but they rarely persist unless paired with strong countermeasures. This does not mean the deep sea lacks diversity. It means diversity expresses itself differently. Instead of vivid colour and complex patterning, variation appears in texture, translucency, body density, and light absorption. Differences are subtle, often invisible to human eyes without artificial lighting. Over time, this selective environment narrows the range of viable forms. Certain body plans become more common because they lend themselves to invisibility. Soft-bodied forms, elongated shapes, reduced appendages, flexible tissues. These features do not guarantee invisibility, but they make it easier to achieve. Hard, angular, heavily armoured forms become less common, not because they cannot survive at all, but because they carry costs that are difficult to offset. Armour increases mass. Mass increases energy demand. Rigid surfaces reflect light. Reflection increases detectability. The trade-offs rarely favour such designs in the deep sea. Even sensory systems evolve under this pressure. Eyes that would reveal reflective surfaces may be reduced. Visual processing that encourages unnecessary movement may be suppressed. Animals evolve to perceive the world in ways that align with remaining unseen. This pressure also affects developmental pathways. Many deep-sea species have larvae that live near the surface and adults that live at depth. These life stages experience very different selection pressures. Larvae may be pigmented, patterned, and active. As they descend, those traits are lost or transformed. Development becomes a transition from visibility to invisibility. This transition is not random. It follows predictable patterns. Pigments fade, bodies become softer, eyes change structure, behaviour slows. Each step reflects a shift in environmental demands. What is striking is how rarely deep-sea evolution reverses this trend. Once a lineage adapts to invisibility, it rarely becomes more visible again. The environment does not reward reversal. There is no new niche that suddenly favours display. The deep ocean remains dark, sparse, and unforgiving. This creates evolutionary stability. Invisibility is not a temporary adaptation. It is a long-term solution. Species that adopt it can persist for millions of years with relatively little change. Fossil evidence suggests that some deep-sea lineages have remained morphologically conservative over vast spans of time, not because evolution stopped, but because their solutions remained effective. From a human perspective, this can make deep-sea life appear static or monotonous. In reality, evolution is still active. It is simply operating under constraints that favour refinement over reinvention. The pressure toward invisibility also influences how new species arise. Speciation in the deep sea often occurs through geographic separation or depth partitioning, rather than through visual signalling differences. Populations diverge because they occupy different layers of the ocean, experience different light conditions, or adapt to different prey. Visual display plays little role in mate selection, reducing one of the major drivers of diversification seen in surface environments. This means deep-sea evolution emphasizes function over form. Differences that matter are those that affect survival, not those that can be seen easily. To human observers, many species may look similar. To each other, they are distinct in ways that matter biologically. The cumulative effect of this pressure is a deep ocean filled with organisms that seem to exist halfway between presence and absence. They are not hidden in the traditional sense. They are simply optimized to produce minimal disturbance in a system where disturbance invites attention. This also reframes how we think about adaptation. Invisibility is often treated as a clever trick or a special case. In the deep sea, it is the default. It is what happens when the environment consistently punishes visibility and rewards restraint. As we move toward the final layers of this exploration, the consequences of this pressure extend beyond biology. They tell us something about how environments shape perception, how limits guide evolution, and how life adapts not by dominating its surroundings, but by aligning with them as closely as possible. And this alignment carries a lesson that reaches beyond the ocean. In some places, survival favours presence and assertion. In others, it favours quiet persistence. The deep sea belongs to the latter, and invisibility is its most enduring signature. When we look at the deep ocean through the lens of near-invisible life, the environment begins to reveal its priorities. These organisms are not exceptions. They are expressions of what the ocean values, what it permits, and what it quietly eliminates over time. Near-invisible life is not just an adaptation to the deep ocean. It is a record of how the ocean operates as a system. The first thing this tells us is that the deep ocean is not shaped by abundance, but by restraint. Energy arrives slowly. Light arrives reluctantly. Encounters are infrequent. In such a system, success is not measured by dominance or speed, but by efficiency and longevity. Near-invisible organisms embody this principle. They use little, they waste little, they disturb little. Their survival strategy is not to conquer space, but to coexist with it without drawing attention. This challenges many surface-based assumptions about life. On land and in shallow seas, ecosystems are built around competition that is visible, displays, territories, constant interaction. The deep ocean operates differently. Its defining feature is not interaction, but separation. Vast distances exist between organisms. Silence dominates. Stillness is common. Near-invisible life fits this environment because it does not demand frequent interaction. It survives without constant negotiation. This tells us that the deep ocean is an environment where absence is as meaningful as presence. The lack of light is not a deficit. It is a condition that structures everything else. Near-invisible organisms do not merely tolerate this condition. They depend on it. Their camouflage only works because light is scarce. Their slow metabolisms only function because temperatures are low. Their drifting behaviours only succeed because currents are gentle and predictable over long timescales. In this sense, invisibility is not a standalone trait. It is an agreement between organism and environment. The ocean provides darkness, depth, and diffusion. The organism responds by minimizing disruption. Neither side functions the same way without the other. Near-invisible life also tells us that the deep ocean is governed by probability rather than certainty. Most interactions never happen. Most predators never encounter prey on any given day. Most prey never see a predator. Survival is determined by long-term averages, not constant engagement. This probabilistic structure favours strategies that reduce risk incrementally, rather than eliminate it outright. Invisibility fits perfectly into this framework. It does not guarantee safety, it lowers the odds of detection. Over time, that is enough. A small reduction in encounter frequency compounds into survival across generations. The ocean rewards this arithmetic. This probabilistic nature also explains why deep-sea ecosystems can appear sparse yet stable. Population densities are low, but extinction rates are not necessarily high. Species persist because they avoid costly interactions. Near-invisible life forms occupy niches defined not by resource monopolization, but by risk avoidance. Another lesson emerges when we consider how widespread invisibility is across unrelated species. This tells us that the deep ocean applies consistent pressure across vast distances and timescales. A jellyfish drifting in one ocean basin faces similar visual constraints as a fish hundreds of kilometers away. The physics of water and light do not change. Evolution responds in parallel. This consistency suggests that the deep ocean is one of the most uniform environments on Earth in terms of selective pressures, despite its immense size. Temperature, pressure, darkness, and energy scarcity vary less dramatically than in surface environments. As a result, solutions that work in one place often work elsewhere. Near invisible life spreads. This uniformity also limits evolutionary experimentation. Radical visual displays rarely persist. Bright coloration, complex patterning, and elaborate visual communication are pruned away unless they serve a very specific function. What remains is a narrow set of viable strategies refined over time. The deep ocean does not encourage novelty for its own sake. It filters relentlessly. Near invisible life also reveals how perception shapes ecosystems. The deep ocean is not defined only by physical constraints, but by how organisms sense each other. Vision, limited as it is, still exerts enormous influence. Entire body plans evolve around what can and cannot be seen. In this way, perception becomes an ecological force. This reminds us that environments are not just physical spaces, they are sensory spaces. The deep ocean is a sensory environment defined by darkness, silence, and diffusion. Near invisible organisms are those that fit seamlessly into that sensory profile. They do not fight it, they align with it. There is also a broader implication for how we study and understand the ocean. Much of deep-sea life appears strange or fragile to human observers because our tools disrupt the very conditions these organisms depend on. Bright lights, noise, and movement reveal forms that were never meant to be seen under such conditions. We observe them outside their natural context. This creates a bias. We tend to focus on the unusual shapes, the dramatic colours revealed by artificial light, the moments of visibility. But the defining feature of deep-sea life is not what we see. It is what we usually cannot see at all. Near invisible organisms dominate by avoiding detection, including detection by us. This has consequences for conservation and exploration. If we assume that what we observe represents the full picture, we underestimate the abundance and diversity of life adapted to remain unseen. Near invisible species may be more sensitive to disturbance precisely because their survival strategies depend on stable sensory conditions. Artificial light pollution, noise, and physical disruption can break the agreements these organisms have with their environment. Near invisible life also tells us something about resilience. These organisms are often slow-growing, slow reproducing, and long-lived. They are not built for rapid recovery from disturbance. Their invisibility protects them from predation, not from environmental change. When the deep ocean is altered, these species may struggle to adapt. This highlights a paradox. Invisibility is a powerful defense within a stable system. It becomes a vulnerability when the system changes. The deep ocean has been stable for long periods of evolutionary time. Human activity introduces changes that are rapid by comparison. Understanding near invisible life helps us appreciate what is at stake. On a more abstract level, near invisible life challenges how we define success in nature. We often celebrate complexity, brilliance, and dominance. The deep ocean celebrates persistence. It rewards organisms that endure quietly, that use minimal resources, that avoid attention. Near invisible life is successful not because it impresses, but because it lasts. This reframing has implications beyond marine biology. It suggests that environments shape not just form, but philosophy. Different conditions favour different ways of being. The deep ocean favours understatement. It favours alignment over assertion. When we view the deep ocean through this lens, it becomes less alien and more coherent. Its inhabitants are not strange anomalies. They are logical outcomes of a system defined by darkness, depth, and scarcity. Near invisible life is the ocean expressing itself through biology. As we approach the final stage of this exploration, one idea becomes increasingly clear. The deep ocean is not empty because we cannot see much in it. It is full of life precisely because so much of that life has evolved not to be seen. And that realization invites a final reflection, not just on the creatures themselves, but on how we, as observers, relate to a world that does not exist for our eyes at all. As we begin to drift back toward the surface, the deep ocean does not suddenly reveal itself. There is no moment where invisibility stops mattering, no clear boundary where hidden life becomes obvious. The ascent is gradual, and so is the return of light. Even as brightness increases, the logic of the deep remains intact. What has evolved to stay unseen does not abandon that strategy simply because conditions change. Near-invisible life does not rely on total darkness alone. It relies on uncertainty, and uncertainty persists well beyond the deepest zones. Light grows stronger, but it is still scattered, still filtered, still directional. The water column remains vast. Encounters remain infrequent. The habits formed in darkness continue to function as depth decreases. Many deep-sea animals migrate upward daily, entering regions where light is stronger than anything they experience in the depths. They do not suddenly become visible or exposed. Their strategies scale with them. Transparency remains effective. Red pigmentation still absorbs most wavelengths. Dark surfaces still limit reflection. Counterillumination adjusts to brighter conditions. Invisibility does not end, it adapts. This tells us something important. Near-invisible life is not an emergency response to extreme conditions. It is a general strategy that remains useful across a wide range of environments. The deep ocean simply pushes that strategy to its most refined form. As light increases, visibility becomes possible, but clarity does not return all at once. Vision improves slowly, contrast increases, colour begins to reappear, yet even here, many animals remain difficult to detect. Their bodies are still low density, their movements are still minimal, their silhouettes are still managed carefully. What changes is not the strategy, but the margin. This gradual transition reinforces the idea that invisibility exists on a spectrum. It is not an on or off state. It is a relationship between body, behaviour and environment. Deep-sea organisms do not rely on a single trick. They rely on alignment, with light, with water, with perception. From a distance, the mid-water zones may appear empty to us, but that emptiness is deceptive. It is filled with organisms that have learned how not to announce themselves. They drift, they pulse, they hover, they feed quietly and move rarely. Their success depends on remaining part of the background rather than stepping out of it. As we rise further, the ocean begins to resemble something more familiar. Light becomes abundant, colours strengthen, the surface world reasserts its visual dominance. And yet even here many of the same principles still apply. Transparency exists in shallow water larvae. Countershading persists in fish near the surface. Silhouette management continues to matter. The deep ocean did not invent invisibility. It refined it. This continuity reminds us that the deep sea is not separate from the rest of the ocean. It is an extension of it, governed by the same physical laws, just taken to extremes. Near-invisible life is the ocean responding consistently to those laws wherever conditions demand it. There is also a lesson here about observation. Much of what we know about the deep ocean comes from moments when invisibility fails, when lights reveal bodies, when movement draws attention, when rare encounters occur. But these moments are not representative of everyday life at depth. Most of the time, nothing is seen because nothing wants to be seen. This means the deep ocean is not empty in the way it can appear. It is full in a way that resists observation. Life persists not in spite of being unseen, but because of it. As we approach the surface fully, it becomes easier to forget this. Our world is built around visibility. We measure, document, and value what we can see. The deep ocean challenges that bias. It reminds us that existence does not require attention, that survival does not require display. That complexity can be quiet. Near-invisible life tells us that evolution does not always favour expression. Sometimes it favours erasure, not disappearance but subtlety, not absence but minimal disturbance. The deep ocean has had hundreds of millions of years to refine this lesson. It has done so patiently, without spectacle, beneath layers of water that absorb light and scatter sound. Its inhabitants are not rushing to be noticed. They are content to endure. And as we drift upward and leave that darkness behind, the ocean does not follow us. It remains below, vast and quiet, full of life that continues on without regard for observation. Still unseen, still functioning, still shaped by rules that reward those who know how to exist without leaving a trace.